Chapter 10-12. The hexagonal sword, as its name suggested, could actually transform into 6 forms and display 6 functions. It was quite outstanding among the spirit-nurturing grade magic treasures. However, if this treasure wanted to advance to the transformation grade, it would require much more effort than other magic treasures to refine. The hexagonal sword itself glowed with 6 colors, namely black, white, yellow, green, red, and blue, which corresponded to its 6 transformations. The dragon-flying ship that flashed with green light, traversing through the void. The immovable void shield that flashed with blue light had amazing defensive power and could defend against powerful attacks from external enemies. The righteous sword that flashed with white light split the heavens and split the earth and destroyed thousands of demons. It symbolized the supreme righteousness and ruled over the heavens. The Dian furnace that flashed with red light could be used to refine elixirs and medicines and could also be used to store enemies in it for refinement. The fairy binding curse lock, a magic treasure that flashed with yellow light, could lock enemies and restrict their powers. The 6th form was a dark and gloomy spike that flashed with black light. It floated in the air, as if it was in between reality and illusion, faintly discernible. It was almost impossible to detect with the naked eye, and it was difficult to determine its position as it drifted. This was the 6th form of the hexagonal sword, Staphylococcus vulgar. There was another magical power with the same name, which came from the ancient book of the Taishu Temple on the Soul, Spiritual Wander to the Taishu Temple. It was a top killer move in the path of cultivating the soul. At this moment, Mu Xian's physical body's gaze became dull, and her eyeballs did not even move, as if she was a clay puppet. Above her head, however, there was a faintly discernible ball of light. It was almost undetectable. Impressively, it was the astral projection. Li Yuanfang's in-spirit doppelganger sat cross-legged in the center of the array at the top of the mountain. His expression did not change, but there was a hint of surprise in his eyes. He did not expect that Mu Xian would dare to have her soul leave her body in front of Yu Hongyan. Soul techniques were strange and unpredictable, and had many transformations. This was a fact, but it was widely recognized to have 2 greatest nemeses. One was the powerful thunder technique, and the other was the majestic energy and blood of martial adepts of the same realm. When one was full of vigor, even ghosts and gods would find it difficult to approach. Although this statement was a little too absolute, it could explain some problems to a large extent. Yu Hongyan, on the other hand, was a cultivator who specialized in martial arts. Even though she was injured at the moment and could not reach the peak of her strength, her majestic qi and blood were extremely blazing. Ordinary demons and monsters would immediately turn into ashes the moment they got close to her. Mu Xian still dared to project her soul out of her body when she couldn't even win against Yu Hongyan. She was practically courting death. Of course, she was not really tired of living. The reason why Mu Xian dared to do this was because she had the hexagonal sword with her. In the blink of an eye, the battle between Yu Hongyan and Mu Xian had already begun. Their lives were hanging by a thread, and it was too much for the spectators to take in. It was at this moment that the other cultivators from Taishu Temple started attacking the hole projected by the formation at the top of the mountain. When they saw Mu Xian's movements, they almost shouted in unison, "Sister Mu won." The plan worked. The previous attack was the most dangerous and the most crucial. That attack didn't do anything to Sister Mu, so the situation is now under Sister Mu's control. Li Yuanfang activated the formation to block them. When he heard that, he frowned slightly and looked up at the fierce battle between Yu Hongyan and Mu Xian in the void. When Yu Hongyan saw Mu Xian's appearance, she immediately knew that her soul had left her body. She did not believe that Mu Xian, who was the direct disciple of Taishu Temple, would not know the weakness of the art of soul. Since she still dared to make a move, it meant that she had something to rely on. The qi and blood in Yu Hongyan's body surged, and there seemed to be flames in her eyes. Her vision almost solidified, turning into a blood-red pillar of light that swept across the void, taking in everything in her eyes. She saw that Mu Xian's soul had entered the flashing black light of Staphylococcus vulgar. The black light around Staphylococcus vulgar suddenly became more intense. At this time, Mu Xian's heaven and earth form retracted her physical body. She reached out a hand to grab Staphylococcus vulgar, and then stabbed towards Yu Hongyan. The black light flashed and disappeared without a trace. Under normal circumstances, it was difficult to see with the naked eye. But at this moment, Yu Hongyan's eyes were shining, and he could vaguely see that fierce Staphylococcus vulgar was stabbing towards him. Whether it was the art of Staphylococcus vulgar recorded in Taishu Temple, or the art of Staphylococcus vulgar transformed from the Dharma treasure hexagonal sword, their purpose was to assassinate the enemy's soul. After merging with the Dharma treasure Staphylococcus vulgar, Mu Xian's soul was protected by the Dharma treasure, and she was no longer afraid of Yu Hongyan's masculine qi and blood. It was like a person sitting in a boat, no longer afraid of the waves outside. And Mu Xian used the art of Staphylococcus vulgar to propel the Dharma treasure. The power of the two sides combined was even more astonishing. At this time, the person in danger became Yu Hongyan. When a martial artist's powerful qi and blood could not restrain the art of soul, it would be very dangerous for a martial artist to face art of soul. If a martial artist had physical strength but did not have a strong enough spiritual will, they were destined to be unable to achieve great things. Yu Hongyan's soul was not weak, but this strength was not reflected in the power of the soul. When she faced the enemy's art of soul, it was difficult for her to effectively defend herself. Usually, martial arts adepts could restrain art of soul, but when this restraint no longer existed, the situation between the two sides was suddenly reversed. It was difficult for martial arts adepts to guard against the attack of art of soul. Seeing this, Yu Hongyan's pair of red eyebrows rose slightly. At this moment, if she had the 7 kill star armor on her, she would not be afraid of the opponent's art of soul. The 7 kill star armor was both offensive and defensive. Whether it was offensive or defensive power, it was not only directed against tangible objects. As long as she could slightly obstruct Mu Xian's attack, she was confident that she could first destroy her opponent's Dharma power. However, whether it was the 7 kill star armor or the army vanquisher halberd, they were both extremely fierce and tyrannical Dharma treasures. They would unknowingly affect the mind of the user, causing them to be filled with thoughts of killing and destruction and become manic. Usually, Yu Hongyan could use 2 Dharma treasures at the same time and still calm her mind. But now, her condition was not good, and she could at most use 1 Dharma treasure at the same time. With Yu Hongyan's personality, she naturally would not choose the 7 kill star armor, which was more inclined towards defense. Instead, she chose to use the army vanquisher halberd, which was a pure offensive weapon. In fact, at this moment, it was still not too late for her to withdraw the halberd and change her Dharma armor. But Yu Hongyan did not do so. Instead, she let out a clear whistle, and a red mass of air that seemed like wind and fog emerged around her body, flashing with a terrifying red light. It was the Avicii Aura Fiend of the 4 great divine winds. The Avicii Aura Fiend could detain the opponent's spirit. From a certain point of view, it also had an obvious restraining effect on spirit techniques. Moreover, it was different from the masculine qi and blood of the physical body. The Avicii Aura Fiend itself was in between existence and non-existence, and did not have an absolute form. Mu Xian's attack did not slow down at all. She was aware that Xianmen Tianzong and Yu Hongyan possessed the Avicii Aura Fiend, but she firmly believed in the power of her magic and the Dharma treasure Staphylococcus vulgar as one. Although the Avicii Aura Fiend was ferocious, Staphylococcus vulgar's attack was concentrated on one point, incomparably condensed and pure. Before she was injured by the Avicii Aura Fiend, Mu Xian was confident that she would be able to pierce through Yu Hongyan's spirit first, and severely injure him. Yu Hongyan's expression was as usual, and his figure suddenly disappeared within the flashing red light of the Avicii Aura Fiend. At first, Mu Xian did not feel anything, but very quickly, her expression changed greatly. This was because, in her perception, Yu Hongyan seemed to have merged with the Avicii Aura Fiend as one, and there was no distinction between them. Under such circumstances, her Staphylococcus vulgar was actually unable to lock onto a target and target Yu Hongyan's spirit to assassinate it. The Avicii Aura Fiend detains the spirit and also destroys the human body. How can she hide? Mu Xian's usually calm gaze was now filled with astonishment. Not to mention that she is a martial adept, and her body has been tempered hundreds and thousands of times. How can she hide within the Avicii or a fiend? Calm down. This should also be one of her remarkable techniques. An old voice came from within Staphylococcus vulgar, and then layers of black light rolled continuously, intertwining with the Avicii aura fiend that was emitting red light. In the next moment, the rolling red light mist dispersed, revealing Yu Hongyan's figure, who was dragging the army destroyer Imperial halberd. The red-haired girl's expression was as calm as ever. Staphylococcus vulgar snorted. I didn't expect you to not only specialize in martial arts, but also have such exquisite skills in other remarkable techniques. Yu Hongyan's red lips parted slightly, and she said indifferently, this technique is called the Avicii walk, and it is also a martial art. Mu Xian and Staphylococcus vulgar were slightly stunned. They saw that Yu Hongyan's entire body was currently flashing with rolling red light, and her entire body seemed to be made out of the Avicii aura fiend. Her body was one with the Avicii aura fiend that was like fog and wind, and as if she was stepping on the waves, she pressed towards Mu Xian and Staphylococcus vulgar. The originally greenish-black army destroyer Imperial halberd in her hand was now flashing with red light, and it was also attached to the Avicii aura fiend. As she waved it, ghosts and gods howled, and it was mournful and strange. At this moment, the army destroyer Imperial halberd accurately intercepted Mu Xian's Staphylococcus vulgar. Both sides collided in the void, and the already injured Staphylococcus vulgar paused for a moment, and it once again let out a muffled groan. Mu Xian's Dharma power of heaven and earth activated Staphylococcus vulgar, but it was met with the strong resistance of the Avicii aura fiend, and it could not really hurt Yu Hongyan's spirit. Even though Mu Xian had always been calm, she could not help but feel a sense of disappointment at this moment. She only felt as if she was facing an opponent that she could not defeat no matter how hard she tried. As Yu Hongyan waved her halberd, Mu Xian was immediately forced to retreat. The rolling red fog of light shrouded the top of White Cloud Mountain and gradually submerged Mu Xian's Dharma power of heaven and earth. Being attacked by the Avicii aura fiend, Mu Xian's Dharma power of heaven and earth suddenly showed spots of broken light. It looked like the outer appearance of a clay statue, under the erosion of wind and rain, gradually decaying and mottled, and the skin was falling off. Yu Hongyan's offensive became more and more intense, and the more he attacked, the more smoothly it became. With a wave of the army destroyer Imperial halberd, Staphylococcus vulgar was shaken away, and the halberd swept horizontally, and the tail of the halberd slammed into the waist of Mu Xian's Dharma power of heaven and earth. Mu Xian once again used the infinite transformation technique, but the Avicii aura fiend around Yu Hongyan's body suddenly rose, and completely sealed off the surrounding space. When Mu Xian's Dharma power of heaven and earth reappeared in the real world, Yu Hongyan's second strike had already arrived. The army destroyer Imperial halberd turned its head and tail, and with one strike, it directly broke Mu Xian's Dharma power of heaven and earth at the waist. The Dharma power of heaven and earth that was gradually disintegrating gradually changed into the appearance of Mu Xian. She watched as her Dharma power of heaven and earth was destroyed by Yu Hongyan, and her eyes were fixed on Yu Hongyan, not saying a word. Meanwhile, the Staphylococcus vulgar in her hand suddenly burst out with a black light, and with the last of its strength, it stabbed towards Yu Hongyan. Yu Hongyan raised his eyebrows, and the halberd in his hand changed direction again, and as it turned, he used the tail of the halberd to block Staphylococcus vulgar. Then, he let go of the army destroyer Imperial halberd with one hand, and clenched his hand into a fist, wrapped in the surging Avicii aura fiend, and smashed heavily on Staphylococcus vulgar. Chapter 10:13. Yu Hongyan's white jade-like fist was glowing with red light at this moment as it heavily smashed onto Staphylococcus vulgar. The seemingly illusory Staphylococcus vulgar, at this moment, was hit by Yu Hongyan's fist, but it seemed to have a real body at this moment. When the two sides collided, a muffled bang was heard. The shining black light around Staphylococcus vulgar was previously destroyed by the army vanquisher halberd. At this moment, before it had time to recover, it was punched by Yu Hongyan again. As a magic treasure, Staphylococcus vulgar could barely withstand it, but the spirit that Mu Xian had placed in it was directly shaken out by this huge force. Once out of the protection of the magic treasure, Staphylococcus vulgar, although Mu Xian was proficient in spirit techniques, and her spirit was tough and strong, it was still extremely difficult to face the boundless evil qi. Especially when her heaven and earth form was destroyed, and her strength was greatly reduced, it was even more so. Her spirit returned to her body, and after the soul and spirit merged together, a dark red blood appeared at the corner of her mouth, and she fell back. Yu Hongyan retracted his fist, and with a wave of the army vanquisher halberd, Staphylococcus vulgar was also knocked away. The black light around Staphylococcus vulgar had dimmed a lot. As the light flickered, the 5 colors of white, red, blue, green, and yellow reappeared, and its appearance changed back to the hexagonal sword. The hexagonal sword guarded beside Mu Xian. Mu Xian's eyes were scattered, and there was no focus in her sight. Blood flowed out of her facial orifices, and she looked quite miserable. When the spirit left the body to cast a secret technique, it was strange and unpredictable, but if it was attacked, without the protection of the body's primordial qi, the spirit would be directly injured. Mu Xian's dharma form of heaven and earth was also destroyed by Yu Hongyan. All the essence of her power was temporarily dispersed, and she couldn't even stabilize her divine soul. Shan Xiang, Ding Runfeng, and the rest of the Taishu Temple cultivators stared in shock at the scene unfolding before their eyes. They did not expect the situation to take such a drastic turn for the worse. Mu Xian, who was supposed to win, was defeated so badly. Mu Xian did not plan to use the art of the soul on the spot. Instead, among the cultivators of the Taishu Temple who were below the primordial divinity realm, her talent in the art of the soul was one of the few. The art of the soul was her forte, especially the Staphylococcus vulgar. Under a surprise attack, the primordial divinity cultivators from other forces had to be careful. Although soul adepts were restrained by the masculine blood of martial adepts, Mu Xian possessed the magic weapon Staphylococcus vulgar formed from the hexagonal sword, so she was no longer afraid of the hot blood of martial adepts below the primordial divinity stage. Even though Yu Hongyan had the Avicii aura, Mu Xian had actually considered this. But after many years of cultivation, and under the guidance of his master, Lin Feng, Yu Hongyan's understanding of his own remarkable martial arts and the Avicii aura had reached a whole new level. Yu Hongyan's strength was not what it used to be, and this was within Mu Xian's consideration. But in what aspect and to what extent, this was not something she could predict. She could only observe and experience it in the process of actual combat. But the price she had to pay was very likely to be beyond redemption. At this moment, Mu Xian was in such a state. Her spirit was seriously injured, and she felt as if there were billions of steel needles stabbing into her brain, making her feel so much pain that she wished she was dead. She could not concentrate at all, and she saw stars in front of her eyes. Her vision darkened, and she completely lost the ability to continue fighting. The destruction of the Dharma power had greatly reduced her strength. If she wanted to cultivate the Dharma power again, it would take a long time. She was still young, and compared to the 3,600 years of life of a Yuanying stage adept, time was not a problem. But what made Mu Xian's heart slightly cold was that she felt her own state of mind begin to fluctuate. She cultivated the way of supreme Wangqing, cut off all means of retreat, and pushed the thread of love she had for Pang Jie to the extreme. If she could not achieve the path, she would instead go downhill. But she had lost at the hands of Xianmen Tianzong's disciple, at the hands of the middle Yuanying stage Yu Hongyan. This serious setback was affecting her state of mind. Not to mention that the knot in her heart could not be untied, it was getting heavier and heavier. Mu Xian had cultivated the way of supreme Wangqing for many years, and could already feel that the situation was developing in a worse direction. Yu Hongyan glanced at Mu Xian and the hexagonal sword indifferently. He carried the army destroyer Imperial Halberd on his back, and he had already landed on the peak of Baiyun Mountain again. He stared calmly and coldly at the other adepts of Taishu Temple. Shan Xiang, Ding Runfeng, and the rest immediately stopped, and their hearts sank to the bottom. Mu Xian and Yu Hongyan's fight had actually only taken a moment, but the outcome was already decided. Not only was Mu Xian's Dharma power destroyed, and her spirit was severely injured, the hexagonal sword was also damaged when it transformed into the immovable void shield and Staphylococcus vulgar. Under such circumstances, it was almost impossible for them to break through the obstruction of Yu Hongyan and Li Yuanfang's doppelgangers. Shan Xiang stared at Yu Hongyan, and Ding Runfeng, who was next to him, reached out and pressed his shoulder. Shan Xiang turned his head, and Ding Runfeng looked at him and slowly shook his head. Remember Sister Mu's words? Brother Shan, I have to say something offensive, you won't be able to help if you go up now. Shan Xiang closed his eyes in pain, and could not speak. Ding Runfeng looked at Yu Hongyan, and thought of Bai Shiqian in the past. He felt bitter in his heart, and sighed, I can only depend on junior brother Chen and junior brother Gua. Chen Xingyu, who had high hopes on him, looked calm, but he was not in a good mood. The reason was because of the young man in front of him, who also looked calm. This young man looked very ordinary, not as strong as Tang Jun, not as arrogant as Han Yang, not as cold as Zhou Yunsong. His facial features could only be considered regular, and could not be said to be handsome. But when people saw him, they would feel at ease, as if he would never disappoint them. He was terrifyingly stable and dazzlingly determined. It was Xianmen Tianzong, the second-generation first-seat disciple of the Qian Tian Palace, Yang Tai. He spread his hands out horizontally, and the heavy and condensed earthy yellow light flashed silently on his left hand, while a blue stream of water floated on his right hand. The stream of water was not light and agile, but was as heavy as the light on his left hand. The icy blue fog around Chen Xingyu floated, and within it, a pale white light shone faintly. The cold and lonely absolute infernal energy floated in the void inside the mountain. Yang Tai nodded slightly. Absolute body? Friend Chen's absolute infernal energy is indeed extraordinary. Behind Yang Tai stood Zhou Yunsong, Lu Xiaofeng, and Li Xingfei. Zhou Yunsong's gaze was fixed on Chen Xingyu, and black smoke had already appeared around his body. Senior brother Zhou, you continue down with senior brother Lu and senior sister Li. I will handle this. At this time, Yang Tai transmitted his voice to Zhou Yunsong. Master, senior uncle and the others have said that unless you kill him on the spot, you should not fight with Chen Xingyu in the near future. Zhou Yunsong's eyes were gloomy. He did not forget what Yang Tai said, but he felt very depressed. Lu Xiaofeng walked in front of him and said softly, there will be a chance. Calm down, restrain yourself, and think about the Taoist name that fifth senior uncle gave you. Zhou Yunsong took a deep breath, turned around and walked away. He did not want to stay there for even a moment. He was cold and ruthless, but he was not really a bloodthirsty person. It was more because of the influence of his burning sun body. Facing Chen Xingyu, he had an innate hostility and longed to fight with him. However, there was no death feud between them. If Chen Xingyu did not take the initiative to attack him, no matter how anxious he would not take the initiative to provoke him. Seeing that Zhou Yunsong was finally listening to their advice, Lu Xiaofeng and Li Xingfei were relieved. They looked at Yang Tai. Brother Yang, be careful. Yang Tai nodded. Don't worry, I am here. Hearing him say so, Lu Xiaofeng and Li Xingfei did not say anything else, and followed behind Zhou Yunsong into the depths of the mountain. When the absolute infernal energy was unleashed, the gentleness in Chen Xingyu's eyes disappeared. His face was expressionless and cold. His tone was calm and indifferent, as if it did not contain any emotion. It is impossible for my temple to back down in the battle of Ding of Shenzhou. Fellow Taoist Yang, please excuse me. After he finished speaking, the ice-blue absolute infernal energy swept toward Yang Tai. Friend Qin, you are too polite. Yang Tai spread out his hands, and the light on his palms suddenly changed. The earth element divine light in the center of his left hand became brighter and brighter from its original earthy yellow color. Finally, it became a pure and flawless light. As for the primordial chaos true water on his right hand, its color became darker and darker, and finally, it became a silent and deep darkness. At this time, Yang Tai put his palms together and chanted in a low voice, Infinite light, infinite darkness. the beginning of the two poles, the creation of the heavens. The black and white light instantly turned into a huge magic altar that looked like a datura flower, yet was not a datura flower. Countless bright and dazzling light rays intertwined with countless dark and deep black lines, forming lines that looked like the orbit of the stars in the sky. Together, they weaved an independent small world. Even though Qin Xingyu's state of mind was indifferent due to the influence of the absolute infernal energy, when he saw this scene, his eyes flickered slightly. In the current divine land, anyone with knowledge would be able to recognize this magic art. This was the self-created magic art of Zhu Yi, the master of the Qian Tian Palace, the second personal disciple of Lin Feng, the light and dark mandala Great Barrier of Heavens. Just like how Zhou Yunsong's blazing yang energy shattering qi, blazing yang exterminating Dao, could incinerate the opponent's yang qi and damage their divine arts and magic power, even injuring the opponent's own yang qi, Qin Xingyu's absolute infernal fiend could similarly annihilate the opponent's yin qi. Facing such an opponent, Yang Tai did not intend to be conservative in defense. Although he seemed to be passive in fights, and always attacked after the opponent attacked, it was not that he did not know the principle of adapting to the situation and making the best use of it. At this moment, he directly unfolded the light and dark mandala Great Barrier of Heavens, sealing Qin Xingyu's absolute infernal energy. Without waiting for his opponent to make any other changes, the altar-like barrier directly collapsed toward the center, imitating the powerful force of the world's destruction. Qin Xingyu's expression was indifferent. As his hands changed the seals, the absolute infernal energy began to twist and turn with the center as the base. After he turned the infinite void of yin and yang into the absolute yin world, Qin Xingyu once again combined the talent of his absolute yin body with the great Tao magic of Taishu, turning the yin-yang crushing heaven and earth grinding mill into the absolute yin crushing heaven and earth grinding mill. He faced Yang Tai's light and dark mandala Great Barrier of Heavens. The proud heirs of the two major forces of the divine land were engaged in a great battle in the belly of the White Cloud Mountain in the Little Kelowna world. Although Qin Xingyu's expression did not change at all, and he did not relax his hands, in fact, deep in his heart, he knew that he had already lost. Although the winner between him and Yang Tai had not been decided, his own Taishu Temple and Xianmen Tianzong were already at a disadvantage in the competition. They did not have the gate of the Sea of Stars, and the number of cultivators who could enter the Sea of Stars was limited. This was a fact, but this could not conceal another fact, and that was the difference between the level of the younger disciples of both sides. It seemed inconspicuous and weak, but at this moment, the foundation of the number one holy land in the divine prefecture was faintly shaking. Chapter 10:14. Although Qin Xingyu's attention was focused on the fight with Yang Tai, he had already noticed some things before this. Mu Xian and the rest of the Taishu Temple disciples were unable to follow them into the belly of the mountain, but the people from Xianmen Tianzong came in. The result outside was obvious. Yang Tai in front of him, Zhou Yunsong and the others who had just left, were only second-generation direct disciples of Xianmen Tianzong. Moreover, they were only in the golden elixir period. However, apart from them, Qin Xingyu had clearly seen Yu Hongyan, Li Yuanfang, and Luo Qingwu, the three direct disciples of Lin Feng, the master of the celestial sect, had also arrived at the foot of the White Cloud Mountain. Thinking of this, Qin Xingyu, who had always been calm and composed and handled matters with ease, also felt a faint sense of despair in his heart. This feeling of despair did not come from Yang Tai in front of him, but from the overall situation at hand. Regarding Guo Chaoyang, Qin Xingyu understood him very well. Although the two of them had different standpoints, Qin Xingyu had never doubted Guo Chaoyang's ability and strength. As the representative figures of the conservative and radical factions within the Taishu Temple in this generation of disciples, the two of them had fought many times and understood each other very well. Qin Xingyu was the disciple of Lin Daohan, the most outstanding disciple of the previous generation of Taishu Temple. He was born with an absolute yin body. Although there were many dangers in the process of cultivation, his talent and cultivation strength were the most outstanding talents of this generation of Taishu Temple disciples. However, Guo Guo Chouyang was able to stand up to him as an equal. The competition between the two of them was balanced, unlike Lin Daohan of the previous generation, who outshone others. But in the current situation, no matter how capable Guo Chouyang was, it would be useless unless he could leap from the early Yuanying stage to the primordial divinity stage in the blink of an eye. If he wanted to maintain some suspense, he would have to reach the late Yuanying stage at the very least. Unfortunately, if Guo Chouyang was truly capable, Chen Xingyu would have admitted defeat long ago. Therefore, Chen Xingyu could hardly be optimistic about the current situation in Little Kelowna world. He looked at Yang Tai again and sighed inwardly. Fighting with Yang Tai right now was meaningless to him. His value was limited. If Zhou Yunsong had stayed behind to fight with him, Chen Xingyu would have been able to gain some additional benefits. Has he realized it? No wonder. Even if he doesn't realize it himself, he has seniors from the same sect. In that case, Xianmen Tianzong probably knows a lot about my situation. Chen Xingyu thought, but if I don't provoke him first, given Xianmen Tianzong's way of doing things, he probably won't kidnap me like how Golden Cicada kidnapped Zhou Yunsong. The premise is what happened back then. Chen Xingyu took a deep breath. His slightly fluctuating emotions instantly returned to a state of stillness and emptiness, as calm as ever. Zhou Yunsong longed for a fight with him. In fact, he had the same thought in his heart. Although it was a pity, he still braced himself and fought fiercely with Yang Tai in front of him. Although the situation was unfavorable for his side and their hopes were slim, Chen Xingyu could not simply muddle along, slack off here, and slowly fool around with Yang Tai. He went all out, even more serious than before, and attacked Yang Tai. If he could defeat him, his side's originally slim hope would increase a little. But at this moment, White Cloud Mountain suddenly shook violently. Chen Xingyu could clearly feel that the flow of spiritual qi in the surrounding environment seemed to have changed. As he carefully sensed the changes, Yang Tai's eyes revealed joy, while Chen Xingyu sighed inwardly. Outside White Cloud Mountain, in the sky of Little Kelowna world, Kai Fengzhou's expression also changed slightly. He controlled the magic cloud pillar to fly up, blocking Shi Tianhao's stone sword. He flicked his fingers lightly, condensing his dermic power into wisps of qi that merged into the huge white qi pillar that originated from White Cloud Mountain. Even so, the white qi pillar was gradually shaking, showing signs of exhaustion. This was not a problem with Kai Fengzhou's dermic powers, but a change in the flow of White Cloud Mountain's spiritual qi. Although compared to the entire Little Kelowna world and White Cloud Mountain, the changes were not great. Kai Fengzhou's previous methods were completely based on the spiritual qi pulsation in Little Kelowna world and the ancient divine land of the past. Even the slightest change would have an infinitely magnified effect. The slightest error could lead to a huge error. Fortunately, Kai Fengzhou's dermic powers were profound and his dermic powers were extensive. As the flow of White Cloud Mountain's spiritual qi changed, he kept on making slight adjustments. Otherwise, the white qi pillar might have been instantly destroyed. Kai Fengzhou frowned slightly. He looked at Shi Tianhao and Zhu Yi's Hao Yang doppelganger in front of him and shook his head slightly. He put his palms together and pinched a spell. In the void around him, boundless clouds surged. Amidst the white clouds, a huge city flashing with golden light rose from the ground and took shape in an instant. The city walls on all four sides formed a huge city, and an immovable, immortal, and eternal power emerged from it. 9 heavens of Taishu technique, 6 heavens of Taishu, outline heaven's celestial city. 2 dermic powers, 1 black and 1 white, intertwined around Kai Fengzhou, turning into a huge whirlpool that kept spinning. It was the manifestation of his yin-yang cycle Dao fruit. The yin-yang cycle Dao fruit integrated into outline heaven's celestial city. Instantly, the seemingly indestructible huge city distorted in the void and lost its original shape. However, the immortal and indestructible power concept became even more intense. There was also an intertwining of yin and yang, and the power was endless and eternal. Outline heaven's celestial city, which was originally a powerful defensive technique, suddenly moved forward and crushed towards Shi Tianhao and Zhu Yi's Hao Yang doppelganger. The city and the surrounding void that kept spinning and twisting locked Shi Tianhao and Zhu Yi within, as though they were going to be sucked into the whirlpool. Shi Tianhao held the stone sword in his hand, and a dazzling light shone on the sword's edge. The smile on his face was gone, but he didn't seem solemn. He was extremely calm and composed. With the sword's edge, Shi Tianhao slashed towards Outline Heaven's celestial city, which was facing the morning sun. However, as soon as the sword was unleashed, the flow of spiritual qi in the little Kelowna world that Ding of Shenzhou had created seemed to tremble. It wasn't because of how powerful the sword was or how vigorous the power was. Instead, it was because the sword intent of Shi Tianhao's sword contained an extremely terrifying power concept. It was as though everything was heading towards extinction and the end. As the stone sword slashed out, it seemed to trigger a few strange air currents that attacked Outline Heaven's celestial city together. Seeing this, Kai Fengzhou's pupils constricted slightly. Malevolent aura. This is the sword Tao of that mystic gate master, but it's not completely the same. The minute yet fierce air currents triggered by Shi Tianhao's sword intent were the malevolent aura of heaven and earth. Malevolent aura was also a part of the creation of the great Tao of heaven and earth, but it was also a mortal enemy. All things in the world were born and died at a certain time, and they were constantly changing. When spiritual qi was abundant, all things would grow and multiply, and the creation of an area would head towards prosperity. When malevolent aura was too abundant, all things would die, and the world would head towards its end. As the malevolent aura of heaven and earth was triggered, even the flow of spiritual qi in the little Kelowna world was affected. When Shi Tianhao slashed out with his sword Tao originated from his own comprehension of Tao techniques. He referenced the sword intent of Lin Feng's heaven-punishing sword qi, and integrated the power of his terminus divine light into it. Terminus was the end of all things, the breaking point. Wherever it passed, everything else would be interrupted and end prematurely, forced to draw a full stop. Shi Tianhao's sword seemed to want to cut through everything, drawing a full stop on everything that obstructed it, causing it to reach its end and walk on the path of no return. Wherever the blade of the sword passed, time stopped, sound became silent, light dimmed, and the flowing wind stopped. Everything that was originally active came to an abrupt stop. Regardless of whether they were willing or not, regardless of what their fate was, they reached their end the moment they came into contact with Shi Tianhao's sword, and were annihilated. Even a dazzling and resplendent star would immediately dim and completely collapse after being slashed by Shi Tianhao's sword. Kai Fengzhou's outlined sky immortal city was augmented by the yin-yang cycle Tao fruit, and its power was majestic. It kept twisting and turning as if it wanted to devour the world, and everything in the surroundings was about to be sucked into it. However, at this moment, after being slashed by Shi Tianhao's stone sword, the speed of the twisting and turning void actually began to slow down. Shi Tianhao's expression was heavy as he held his sword horizontally, blocking Kai Fengzhou's outlined sky immortal city. The massive city was extremely huge, and the difference in size between the two sides was completely disproportionate. A resplendent luster flowed endlessly on the stone sword's tip. Traces of viciousness constantly gathered towards Shi Tianhao's sword, resisting the power of outlined sky immortal city together. At this moment, the changes in the spiritual qi flow in White Cloud Mountain below were increasing in magnitude. The frequency was also fast and slow. As White Cloud Mountain was the hub of the spiritual qi flow in the little Kelowna world, the changes caused by White Cloud Mountain had even begun to gradually affect the spiritual qi flow in the entire little Kelowna world. Although the changes were minute, they truly existed. Outside the mountain, Shi Tianhao's sword had triggered the viciousness of heaven and earth. Although it was only a few wisps, it had caused the spiritual qi flow in this world to become increasingly unbalanced. It was easy to destroy but difficult to build. At this stage, even the Tao integration stage expert of the Taishu Temple, Kai Fengzhou, could not grasp the changes in the spiritual qi flow in time. The massive cloud pillar that rose from White Cloud Mountain was finally unable to continue and began to gradually collapse. Zhu Yi's Hao Yang clone glanced at Kai Fengzhou. In the end, he still did not say a word and descended toward White Cloud Mountain. Kai Fengzhou frowned. The auspicious cloud pillar flew up again and smashed toward Hao Yang's clone. However, he heard Shi Tianhao say indifferently, "Rise." Before he had even finished speaking, 3 balls of light flashed above his head. One of the balls of light transformed into an incomparably massive greenish-black palace. It looked no smaller than Kai Fengzhou's outline heaven immortal city. Although it was still a spirit-nurturing stage magic treasure, the energy fluctuations within it were majestic and ferocious. Meanwhile, the second ball of light transformed into a purple crown. Bolts of purple lightning were like raging dragons that shuttled back and forth in the clouds in the sky. The third ball of light dissipated, revealing a small ancient bell. It looked as if it was cast from gold. It had a simple and unadorned design, and its surface was engraved with mysterious patterns that exuded a vigorous power. It was the manifestation stage magic treasure, the Yellow Heaven Bell. The Kunpeng Palace, the Yellow Heaven Bell, and the Purple Crown of Ascension appeared at the same time. Even though the auspicious cloud pillar was controlled by Kai Fengzhou, it could only stop in its tracks. It could not even fend for itself and could not intercept Zhu. Meanwhile, Zhu Yi's Hao Yang clone had already landed on White Cloud Mountain. Chapter 10:15. Seeing Zhu Yi's Hao Yang clone land on White Cloud Mountain, Kai Fengzhou could not help but let out a long sigh towards the sky. At this moment, the situation was completely out of Taishu Temple's control. Even though Zhu Yi, who was in Little Kelowna World, was only a clone and not his main body, Kai Fengzhou did not think that Chen Xingyu and the rest could withstand it. The vast Yang doppelganger directly entered the hole projected by the array formation at the top of the mountain and disappeared. The speed was so fast that Mu Xian, Dan Xiang, Ding Runfeng and the others at the top of the mountain were completely unable to react. However, they were slightly apprehensive. Their instincts told them that something bad was about to happen, and this made them even more anxious. A moment later, White Cloud Mountain suddenly shook violently. The magnitude of the shaking was far greater than before. If it was said that there were only slight tremors before, then the area where White Cloud Mountain was now was like a real earthquake. Kai Fengzhou was the most familiar with the original flow of spiritual qi in Little Kelowna World, so what he felt at this moment was also the most obvious. A faint purple aura started to appear around White Cloud Mountain, and the deafening sound of reading could be vaguely heard. The stone sword in Shi Tianhao's hand, who was facing off against Kai Fengzhou, shone brighter and brighter. The distorted space in Outline Heaven Immortal City was gradually becoming still. He smiled. "Sir, do you still want to continue?" Kai Fengzhou's expression did not change, but he was smiling bitterly in his heart. He had not lost yet, and the outcome of his battle with Shi Tianhao had not been decided. However, there was no longer any meaning in continuing the battle. He could almost foresee how things would develop next. Purple aura lingered on White Cloud Mountain, and a pillar of light suddenly soared into the sky, piercing through the heavens above. Then, strips of light kept extending in all directions in the sky, like veins and passageways. On the ground, with White Cloud Mountain as the center, many glowing paths appeared. On these paths of light, one could vaguely see a large amount of air flowing in and out. "It's the qi of heaven and earth." Shan Xiang, Ding Runfeng, and the others were from the Taishu Temple, so they naturally had good eyesight. But what made their hearts heavy was that the light patterns formed by the qi of heaven and earth were gradually changing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The extent of the change was not necessarily large, but all of this was happening. Shan Xiang and the others naturally did not wish to see such a scene. As the heirs of the Taishu realm, they had some understanding of the situation of their White Cloud Mountain in the Divine Land. They naturally knew that the flow of spiritual qi in the Little Kelowna World was the most beneficial for their Taishu Temple. Complex patterns of light lit up between heaven and earth, and the entire Little Kelowna World began to tremble. The disciples of the Taishu Temple felt a little bitter. Is the cultivator of Xianmen Tianzong going to refine Ding of Shenzhou? How can it be so easy? The hexagonal sword said in an old and weak voice. It's only affecting and changing the flow of spiritual qi in the little Kelowna world. It's still a long way from communicating with the origin spirit of the creation artifact and finally refining the artifact. Although that was what it said, the voice of the hexagonal sword became deeper, and it clearly sounded a little bitter. This was because it clearly knew that Zhu Yi's Haoyang clone still had a long way to go before he could refine Ding of Shenzhou. However, his actions in Ding of Shenzhou might bring about serious consequences. Shoichi Daishin and Xianlin Taoist were both outside, but Lin Feng's Brontosaurus clone, the God of War clone, and Wang Lin's Great Devil clone were also outside. Before this, there had been no movements in the little Kelowna world, which meant that the struggle between the two sides was mostly at a stalemate. The fact that the disciples of both sides were sent to White Cloud Mountain at the same time also reflected many problems. The situation in White Cloud Mountain would definitely affect the fight between the big shots of both sides outside Ding of Shenzhou. At this moment, outside of Little Kelowna world, Lin Feng's God of War clone placed one hand on Little Kelowna world, and pointed at the yin and yang life and death formation above with the other hand. The yin and yang life and death formations suddenly unfolded, while Lin Feng's Brontosaurus clone loosened its claws and came before Shoichi Daishin. Shoichi Daishin frowned as he watched the purple qi in the Little Kelowna world gradually become more vigorous, while the white qi was gradually being suppressed. The balance between the two sides was initially at a stalemate, but now it began to lose its balance. Unfortunately, his Taishu temple was on the losing side. There's a problem inside the world. There's a change in White Cloud Mountain. Shoichi Daishin and Xianlin Taoist both understood what was going on. The collapse of a 1,000-mile dike was caused by an ant's nest. The gap between them grew larger and larger, until it became irrecoverable and unmanageable in the end. At this moment, the gap between the younger disciples caused the imbalance of the situation, affecting the outcome of the battle between Zhu Yi, Shi Tianhao, and Kai Fengzhou. Zhu Yi's Haoyang clone entered White Cloud Mountain before Kai Fengzhou, and seized the opportunity to cooperate with Lin Feng outside. In the end, the struggle between Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin lost its balance. The stalemate was broken, and Lin Feng also seized the opportunity to refine Ding of Shenzhou. Bit by bit, the chain reaction that was triggered was extremely huge. In the Little Kelowna world, from Kai Fengzhou to Chen Xingyu, Guo Chaiyang, and the others, everyone was still working hard. They knew how delicate the situation was. Although they were pessimistic, they still wanted to try to salvage the situation. Otherwise, the snowball of collapse would become bigger and bigger, and the final result would be reflected in the battle between the higher-ups of both sides. The pressure would fall on Shoichi Daishin and Xianlin Taoist. Outside the Little Kelowna world, Xianlin Taoist took a deep breath. Is it because junior brother Kai is no match for Shi Tianhao and Zhu Yi, or is there a change in other aspects? As he pondered, he did not slow down at all, and directly charged towards the Little Kelowna world. Wang Lin's Great Devil clone did not stand on ceremony either. He immediately went up to block Xianlin Taoist's path. Cangtian Dao Jian did not follow Shi Tianhao into the Little Kelowna world. At this time, he also went up against Xianlin Taoist with Wang Lin. If it was only Wang Lin's Great Devil clone, Xianlin Taoist was confident that he could defeat it. However, with the addition of Cangtian Dao Jian, the situation was completely different. This was a magic treasure that had reached the Mahayana grade in ancient times. It was powerful and sharp. Even Dao Master Xianlin couldn't ignore its existence. When Cangtian Dao Jian and Wang Lin's Great Devil clone joined hands, Xianlin Taoist would not be able to defeat them. Even if he could, it would not be something that could be done in a short time. Shoichi Daishin pressed one hand against the Little Kelowna world, and the other hand lifted up. The Taishu temple appeared above his palm, and collided with Lin Feng's yin and yang formation. In the Battle of West Hill City, the Taishu Sage Temple had once clashed directly with the yin and yang life and death formation. In the end, the Taishu Sage Temple had forcibly torn apart the light screen formed by the two extremities of the yin and yang life and death formation. At this moment, the two sides were fighting again. Under the collision, the yin and yang formation did not yield an inch, and blocked the Taishu Temple. The huge temple, which seemed to be the resting place of all the giant gods, seemed to be able to contain the entire void of the star sea. Light flashed, and the gods and Buddhas chanted. However, it was blocked by the world of light formed by the yin and yang formation, and could not go any further. Wherever the light of the Taishu temple reached, it seemed to turn the universe and the starry sky into its own courtyard. However, the yin and yang formation forcibly drew a fence in the void, and divided the surrounding heaven and earth into two sides. It's different from the time in West Hill City, Lin Feng said lightly. Shoichi Daishin looked at the center of the yin and yang formation, and the indistinct 49 light spots. His eyes narrowed slightly, and then returned to normal. He said calmly, "It's indeed different." As he spoke, he pinched the palm that held up the Taishu temple and pinched a Dharma formula. Suddenly, white clouds curled up and golden light flashed. Between the white clouds and the golden light, there seemed to be countless figures chanting together. A celestial sound lingered, lingering, and like a fairyland, a world that made people yearn for it appeared on Shoichi Daishin's palm. The 9 heavens of Taishu technique, the 8 heavens of Taishu. Shen Tianmiao has the celestial realm. This Shen Tianmiao had the power of the celestial realm, and it was compatible with the Taishu temple. The shape of the Taishu temple suddenly changed, manifesting the celestial realm of the Taishu temple. Together with Shoichi Daishin's power, they pushed toward the yin and yang formation. Lin Feng's yin and yang formation had his 49 yin and yang dust as its core, and its power had increased to a new level. It could already fight against the creation magic treasure Taishu temple. However, the Taishu temple was operated by Kuang Heng and Xianlin Taoist together, and its power was also different when it was operated by Shoichi Daishin. Lin Feng's god of war doppelganger's expression did not change at all. While operating the yin and yang formation, he also worked on the little Kelowna world. His Brontosaurus doppelganger smiled. "It's all different now." After saying that, the huge white Brontosaurus's body shone with 4-colored lightning, and in its eyes, all things of creation and the vicissitudes of life flashed. At this moment, its powerful and huge body was constantly changing between real and fake. One moment, it was still a dragon body with majestic demonic power, and the next moment, it turned into a ball of light and shadow. It was like a dharma body of the void that was cultivated after refining the spirit and returning to the void. In the next moment, the yin and yang formation wondrous realm covered Shoichi Daishin's body. Seeing this, Shoichi Daishin's pupils contracted slightly. His power was compatible with the Taishu temple, and he wanted to break the yin and yang formation wondrous realm. However, when Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger performed the technique, the god of war doppelganger also operated the yin and yang formation and swept over, engulfing the celestial realm of the Taishu temple. In an instant, the two sides fell into a stalemate again. However, because of the yin and yang formation wondrous realm, the connection between Shoichi Daishin and the little Kelowna world was cut off at this moment. The eyes of Lin Feng's god of war doppelganger flashed with purple light, and the little Kelowna world was quickly dyed purple. The white mist that had turned into a tree without roots was gradually defeated. Shoichi Daishin's calm eyes suddenly lit up with an unprecedented light. His gaze shifted between Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger and the god of war doppelganger, and his aura became extremely dangerous. Seeing this, Lin Feng smiled. "Why, Shoichi Daishin, are you trying to use the Dharma-ending calamity to force me to descend here?" Chapter 10:16. Lin Feng looked calm. "Do you need me to come here?" Shoichi Daishin didn't speak. He just looked at Lin Feng. For a moment, he really had the idea of using the Dharma-ending tribulation. A few experts in the initial tribulation stage might be able to compete with experts in the Dharma-ending realm in terms of divine sense and Dharma power, but once the opponent activated the Dharma-ending tribulation and hurt them, the result would be disastrous. For experts who hadn't completely passed the initial tribulation, enduring the Dharma-ending tribulation of an expert in the Dharma-ending realm was no different from starting a new tribulation on the spot. They would instantly fall into a period of severe weakness. They might not become lambs waiting to be slaughtered, but their strength would be greatly reduced. If there was a slight deviation, they might even directly die under the Dharma-ending tribulation. For practitioners who hadn't experienced the tribulation, facing experts in the Dharma-ending realm, if they couldn't properly resist and avoid the Dharma-ending tribulation, it would naturally be more dangerous, and they might even be killed instantly. As long as the experts in the Dharma-ending realm were willing to bear a Dharma-ending tribulation. However, although this method was straightforward, it had endless consequences. Most experts in the Dharma-ending realm would not use this method when their divine sense and Dharma power could subdue their opponents. After all, it was purely to hurt others. They also had to resist the Dharma-ending tribulation. If they were attacked by the Dharma-ending tribulation and hurt themselves, it would be easy for a third party to benefit from it. It was the worst strategy in a situation where there was no other way. Of course, if the situation was really necessary, Shoichi Daishin was decisive and would not have too many scruples. Lin Feng had always been sure of this. His Brontosaurus doppelganger could fight Shoichi Daishin in its original form. The yin and yang life and death formation could also wrestle with the Taishu Temple. In the case that they joined forces, he only needed to use the yin and yang restoration magical realm to block the connection between Shoichi Daishin and the Taishu Temple. After all, Shoichi Daishin and the Taishu Temple were two different individuals. They were not as close as the Dharma-ending realm and the unity of Demon Soul. However, if Shoichi Daishin were to activate the Dharma-ending catastrophe, the situation would be completely different. Whether it was the righteous Tao Venerate himself or the Taishu Sage Temple taking on the Dharma-ending cataclysm head-on, although they would be injured and their strength would decrease, they could still continue fighting. After the battle, they could focus all their strength and gradually recover from the damage caused by the degeneration cataclysm. It was completely acceptable for Shoichi Daishin to face the Dharma-ending catastrophe head-on. However, if Lin Feng's Brontosaurus clone and the God of War clone were to be struck by the Dharma-ending calamity, it was very likely that they would directly collapse and be annihilated. The Taishu Temple could help Kuang Heng and Xianlin Taoist withstand the tribulation, but the yin and yang life and death formation could not help Lin Feng. Shoichi Daishin stared at Lin Feng, watching the torrential purple chi sweeping and spreading in the little Kelowna world, and his brows furrowed tighter and tighter. For him, activating the Dharma-ending catastrophe was naturally a bad plan. The Taishu Temple did not have the gate of the Sea of Stars, and it already lacked backup. If he was entangled by the degeneration calamity, the situation would be even more difficult to control. If activating the Dharma-ending catastrophe could work, Shoichi Daishin would still not hesitate. But now he had some doubts in his heart. After all, Lin Feng's mysterious heavenly escape technique was now well known in the world. It was unknown to Shoichi Daishin whether his two clones had mastered this technique or not. If the Brontosaurus clone and the God of War clone were also proficient in this technique, it would undoubtedly be meaningless for Shoichi Daishin to activate the Dharma-ending catastrophe, and it would only weaken his combat strength. Moreover, the most important point was that Lin Feng had a gate of the Sea of Stars, and his real body could come over at any time. Shoichi Daishin did not know the reason why Lin Feng's real body did not enter the Sea of Stars, but he could guess that it was most likely because he was busy with other things, or was temporarily tied down by other things. Forcing Lin Feng's real body to come to the Sea of Stars at this time might delay the other things he was busy with, but for the people of the Taishu Temple, there was no benefit at all. It was purely harming others without benefiting themselves. Although it made people feel depressed just thinking about it, Shoichi Daishin was not a person who did not dare to face the truth. Before this, the ownership of Ding of Shenzhou was still in suspense, and the biggest reason was that Lin Feng's real body was not here. If Lin Feng's real body was really allowed to come to the Sea of Stars, and in a situation where the other big shots of the Taishu Temple could not come to support, there was no longer any suspense about the ownership of Ding of Shenzhou. Even if the power of the Haotian mirror was guided into the Sea of Stars, it would be blocked by the power of the boundaries, and its power would be greatly reduced, and it would also delay the recovery of the Haotian mirror. In the end, the best result that the Taishu Temple could fight for was to force Lin Feng to unseal the Sky Punishment Sword, and the hope was not great. In the end, it was still harming others without benefiting oneself. To be more precise, it was harming others and harming oneself. If Lin Feng's Sky Punishment Sword was really forced to unseal in advance, it would definitely not come back empty-handed. Now that the two sides were fighting for Ding of Shenzhou, it was still a treasure without an owner, and the fight over it depended on their own ability. Opportunities fell from the sky, and those who were capable could take it. However, if one went too far, the two sides would completely fall out, and there would be a fight to the death in this sea of stars. With Shoichi Dashin's style and character, he never resisted fighting with others, but he cared about the results of the fight. At this moment, the strength of the two sides in the Sea of Stars was completely disproportionate. As long as Lin Feng was willing, he could even move the entire Xianmen Tianzong from the Divine Land into the desolate ancient Sea of Stars. Shoichi Dashin's tightly knitted brows gradually relaxed, and the light in his eyes gradually subsided. Everything returned to normal, but his eyes became more serene. Sky Punishment Sword. Although his heart had already calmed down, this thought still came to Shoichi Dashin's mind at this time. 5 years ago in the vast thousand worlds, after escaping from the suppression of the spiritual sea, Shoichi Dashin had the intention to join forces with Lord Qingyi, Lord Xian, and the others to force Lord Tai to suppress and punish Lin Feng and Xianmen Tianzong. However, not only did Lin Feng's strength soar compared to the past, but he also achieved the Sky Punishment Sword because of the destruction of the celestial heaven in the Battle of Mount Shu. In the end, the matter could only be left unsettled. If Ding of Shenzhou also falls into the hands of Xianmen Tianzong, the situation will be even more urgent. As junior sister Qingyi said, the sooner the original plan is carried out, the better. Shoichi Dashin was silent. Thoughts flashed in his mind, and his hands did not slow down at all. However, he gave up the idea of using the Dharma ending tribulation, and instead urged his supernatural powers and Dharma power. The power of Shin Tianmiao Fairyland continued to increase, and it constantly resonated with the Taishu Fairyland transformed by the Taishu Temple. This magic of his is more effective against the Dharma treasures of the human clan than against the demon clan. This magic is indeed worth paying attention to. Not to mention the deep mysteries hidden in it, just by using it in a fight, it actually faintly restrains the Taishu Temple, as if it wants to split the Taishu Temple again into the Supreme Formation-breaking drum and the Void Yin-Yang Bell. Shoichi Dashin's face was expressionless. He continued to exert more force to stabilize the Taishu Temple, and at the same time, a mysterious and powerful force broke Lin Feng's Yin and Yang restoration magical realm. He held the Taishu Temple in his hand and stepped out, shaking off the brilliance of the Yin and Yang formation with a loud bang. I have to finish this quickly. With a slight change of thought, Shoichi Dashin's body began to emit a layer of hazy brilliance. It seemed to be there and not there, mysterious and mysterious. This brilliance was not bright, dazzling, grand, or shocking, but it was mysterious and unfathomable. It was indescribable and seemed omnipotent. At this moment, in the little Kelowna world, from the outside, the purple chi had overwhelmed the white chi. Shoichi Dashin's face was expressionless. He pressed his other hand on the little Kelowna world, but the inside of the little Kelowna world suddenly shook. The space of the world kept folding and shrinking, and finally returned to the original appearance of Ding of Shenzhou. Clang! A loud sound suddenly spread out from the body of the cauldron, and ripples that were clearly visible to the naked eye kept spreading to the surrounding void. Xianlin Taoist, Tsangtian Dao Jian, and Wang Lin's great devil doppelganger were at the periphery. Facing the ripples, their expressions turned solemn, and they dealt with it cautiously. Lin Feng and Shoichi Dashin stared intently at Ding of Shenzhou. They could clearly feel that there was a majestic will coming from Ding of Shenzhou at this moment. It was not specific words, nor was it a clear will. It was just that one could feel its existence. At the same time, this existence was extremely powerful, and it was hard to ignore. However, at this moment, Shoichi Dashin felt his palm, which was placed on Ding of Shenzhou, suddenly tremble. Ding of Shenzhou was targeting him, and it was clear that it was resisting him. This resistance was not strong, but it was clear, and no one would ever misunderstand it. The next moment, an image appeared in the minds of Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin. A person dressed in a black dragon robe stood in the void. He wore a flat crown on his head, and his facial features could not be seen clearly. This was not the primordial spirit of Ding of Shenzhou, but the expert who refined it in the past, Xia Huang. At this moment, Xia Huang was looking into the distance. In the distance, waves were undulating, and there was a huge battle going on. A few Yuanying human race cultivators surrounded and killed a demon king, but they were soon killed by a great demon king with an indestructible demon soul. In the blink of an eye, this great demon king with an indestructible demon soul was blocked by a human race expert in the primordial soul realm, and the two sides began a bloody battle. In the end, the human race expert was more skilled. Although he was also seriously injured, he still killed his opponent. However, before he could enjoy the joy of victory, before he could escape from the battlefield to heal his injuries, a roaring and galloping Feng Yi, whose body was burning with blue-purple demonic flames, rushed up from behind and directly smashed his primordial soul. Almost at the same time, a human race Dao integration realm expert descended from the sky and kicked the fire pig. Its huge body kept rolling between heaven and earth, turning the surrounding tens of thousands of kilometers into a sea of fire. When Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin saw this human race expert, their eyes narrowed slightly. This was the martial arts expert from the ancient giant spirit sect that they had seen in the light and shadow that appeared in Ding of Shenzhou. This person strode toward Feng Yi, but soon, a heavenly demonic ape pounced toward him. When Lin Feng saw this scene, he understood. This happened earlier than what we saw in the light and shadow. He looked at Xia Huang and saw that Xia Huang was also watching the battlefield in the distance. Next, it should be the heavenly demonic ape fighting with the expert from the ancient giant spirit sect, the refining armor black dragon fighting with a Buddhist mighty figure, and finally, Xia Huang arriving and cooking the great demon king. However, perhaps because he did not deliberately suppress or hide his injuries, Lin Feng could clearly feel the weakness in Xia Huang, who had not appeared in front of others. Although his aura was stable and did not reveal any flaws, Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin could clearly feel that Xia Huang had been injured at this moment. Xia Huang stood silently in the void. After a long time, a faint sigh sounded between heaven and earth. Except for Xia Huang himself and Ding of Shenzhou, no one knew. However, Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin could tell what Xia Huang was sighing about through the light and shadow left by Ding of Shenzhou. Revenge breeds revenge, and it is hard to say what is good and bad. After all, I have something that I cannot give up, so I cannot escape this cycle. Chapter 1017. Lin Feng silently looked at Xia Huang in the light and shadow in front of him, feeling his injuries. In this state, Xia Huang, who was not in front of others, did not deliberately suppress or hide his own state, so he could see more things. And these things at the moment were quite unexpected to Lin Feng. Lin Feng watched as Xia Huang's eyes flashed. He straightened his back, and all his weakness disappeared. Once again, he regained the impeccable demeanor of a human emperor. He carried Ding of Shenzhou and headed toward the battlefield in the distance. There, a powerful Buddhist cultivator was using the Buddhist kingdom in the palm to subdue the black dragon. The light and shadow ended here. As for what happened next, the image reflected by Ding of Shenzhou had already told Lin Feng the result. When Lin Feng opened and closed his eyes, his gaze was calm. He raised his eyes to look at Shoichi Daishin again, and saw that Shoichi Daishin was also looking at him at this moment. Mysterious light flashed on his opponent's body, but Lin Feng seemed to turn a blind eye to it. His God of War doppelganger continued to pour magic power into Ding of Shenzhou, and Ding of Shenzhou's core, Zhu Yi, was also exerting force, working with Lin Feng from the inside. Ding of Shenzhou rumbled, and the shaking became more intense. The Great Will became more obvious. Feeling the mysterious light flashing around Shoichi Daishin, its resistance also became stronger. The huge body of the cauldron suddenly emitted a majestic light. It was not dazzling, but it seemed extremely deep and heavy. In the light, there were mountains, rivers, snowy plains, deserts, and all kinds of landforms. It showed the great power of the changes of the sea, as if the whole world of divine land was pressing down. The light collided with the mysterious light on Shoichi Dashin's body. As Shoichi Dashin reached out to stop Ding of Shenzhou, Taishu Temple pressed down on Ding of Shenzhou. But Lin Feng would not just stand aside and watch. The god of war doppelganger drove the yin and yang life and death formation, changing into the yin and yang reversal, and once again wrapped around Taishu Temple. As for the lightning dragon clone, it once again used the mysterious mystique of the yin and yang return to origin mystical realm to envelop Lord Righteous One and the great void sage hall. The power of the heavens and earth of a mystical realm began to circulate together. Beams of spiritual power landed on Lord Righteous One and the great void sage hall. Putting Shoichi Dashin aside, Taishu Temple began to shake. Shoichi Dashin shook his head slightly. Taishu Temple formed by the supreme formation breaking drum and the void yin-yang bell had a time limit, and it could not be reunited immediately after disintegration. Previously, when not fighting, Shoichi Dashin used his primordial spirit to nourish the magic treasure, so that Taishu Temple could always exist. But if it was used to fight, it would still disintegrate after reaching the limit of its time, or if it was damaged. Unless they were severely damaged, the duration of the Taishu Sage Temple's existence was almost fixed. It would not be affected by the pressure of the battle. However, there were exceptions to everything. The Taishu Sage Temple had met with this exception today. In the long years before, the heaven primordial great world had never existed. It was only 5 years ago that the vast thousand worlds had appeared for the first time. It was the yin and yang return to origin wondrous realm that Lin Feng had created. Continuously bearing the yin and yang restoration magical realm, Taishu Temple gradually became unstable. Its time limit was greatly reduced, and it seemed that it would disintegrate at any time. Shoichi Dashin frowned, but he did not loosen his hand on Ding of Shenzhou. With a flash of mysterious light, Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger and Ding of Shenzhou shook slightly. Then, Ding of Shenzhou's majestic light and shadow rolled toward the yin and yang restoration magical realm. And Lin Feng's yin and yang restoration magical realm also lost control for a moment. Taishu mystic light. As Lin Feng's eyes flickered, the Brontosaurus doppelganger let out a long roar and suddenly stretched out its right claw, grabbing toward Shoichi Dashin. The silver dragon claw, which was flashing with four-colored lightning, suddenly turned golden. The four-colored lightning was still entwined, grabbing the mystic light around Shoichi Dashin. Shoichi Dashin's expression did not change. The mystic light flashed around him, unfathomable, indescribable, and extremely mysterious. With a flash of mystic light, the claw of Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger finally fell toward Ding of Shenzhou. Lin Feng's eyes were filled with understanding, surprise, doubt, and understanding. Finally, he laughed. So this is the Taishu mystic light. On Mount Yujing in the Divine Land, Lin Feng's original body laughed softly. What a coincidence. The great Tao is indeed wonderful. As the Brontosaurus doppelganger let out a long roar, its body turned into balls of light and shadow, its figure constantly changing between the dragon body and the light and shadow. And at this moment, the starlight in the desolate ancient sea of stars flickered nonstop, as if the millions of stars were being guided by some kind of power. The orbit of the stars that had been circulating endlessly since ancient times also seemed to be changing. Not only the projection of the stars in the sea of stars, but even the stars in the universe of the real vast thousand worlds seemed to be shaking at this moment. The orbit of the stars that had existed since ancient times and the infinite power of the millions of stars seemed to be shaking at this moment, about to produce a subtle change. This change was so subtle, but the foundation of its occurrence was so huge that even the slightest change would cause an earth-shattering change. Naturally, Shoichi Dashin also felt the change. He could clearly feel that this huge change and the infinite power produced were added to Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger. The huge dragon body suddenly twisted in the void, and then Shoichi Dashin saw that the golden right claw of the Brontosaurus doppelganger, which was originally grabbing towards Ding of Shenzhou, suddenly changed direction, still grabbing towards him and the Taishu Temple. and Ding of Shenzhou, which was originally crashing towards the Yin and Yang Restoration magical realm, rushed towards the Taishu Temple. The Yin and Yang Life and Death Formation, which had originally wrapped around the Taishu Temple, attacked Shoichi Daishin himself. The Yin and Yang Life and Death Formations suddenly unfolded, performing the two extremes' infinite changes. Together with the right front claw of the Brontosaurus doppelganger, they fell towards Shoichi Daishin. The Yin and Yang Restoration magical realms suddenly retracted, strangling the connection between Shoichi Daishin and the Taishu Temple, while Ding of Shenzhou slammed into the Taishu Temple. As if enraged by Shoichi Daishin's manipulation of the Taishu divine light all day long, Ding of Shenzhou, which was already slightly hostile, suddenly surged with power. The light of all things in the divine land manifested on the body of the cauldron, so thick that it was almost tangible. The huge cauldron seemed to have turned into divine land and slammed heavily into the Taishu Temple. If it were any other time, the Taishu Temple could still withstand it. But the Taishu Temple, which had been shaken by the Yin and Yang Restoration magical realm, was directly smashed into pieces by the sudden violent Ding of Shenzhou. Endless white clouds spread to the surrounding starry sky, covering the firmament. Among the scattered white clouds, countless golden lights flew in all directions, like a meteor shower in the sea of stars. The golden lights condensed, and the clouds folded. The Taishang Formation breaking drum and the void yin-yang bell reappeared in the void. The Taigu Immortal and yin-yang elder appeared, looking solemnly at Ding of Shenzhou. The Taishu light shone around Shoichi Daishin. Under the effect of the light, Lin Feng's yin and yang formation swept toward his Brontosaurus clone, while the Brontosaurus clone clawed at Ding of Shenzhou. Lin Feng smiled faintly, thinking, even though the effects of the power can be restrained, right now it still can't be maintained and used like the void mystic light all day long. To complete the new magic, I still need a lot of comprehension and consideration. As he was thinking, the Brontosaurus clone once again surged with majestic power, and the light around Shoichi Daishin suddenly dimmed. Shoichi Daishin's pupils contracted slightly. Before he could activate the Taishu light again, Lin Feng's yin and yang formation had already turned around, and a huge force pressed down on his head, like the power of a world of creation. The Taishu Taoist raised his palm, and the vast white clouds kept condensing, turning into a towering mountain. It was as vast as the sky and as heavy as the ground, as if this mountain was a world of its own. The moment the mountain was formed, it collided with the yin and yang formation. The yin and yang formation was knocked back, but the towering mountain was also cracked, on the verge of disintegration. The huge tail of Lin Feng's Brontosaurus clone rolled up the yin and yang four symbols thunderbolt, and with a swing, it seemed to be able to collapse the pillars of the sky and instantly shattered the mountain. And his right front claw, like lightning, grabbed Shoichi Daishin's right arm, leaving 5 golden bloody marks. The essence of the Great Way, like golden blood, poured out from the wounds. Shoichi Daishin retreated, and his left palm hit the surface of the formation-breaking drum. A golden light pattern burst out, and the yin and yang formation stopped moving forward. Then, Shoichi Daishin flicked his fingers again, and a white cloud fell on the void yin and yang bell. In an instant, it took him, the Taishang bell, and the void bell away from the Brontosaurus clone and Ding of Shenzhou. Lin Feng's Thunder Dragon clone did not continue to chase after him. He stopped where he was and calmed down the demon power in his body. The yin and yang life and death array returned to the sky above the God of War clone and stood beside the divine prefecture cauldron. Lin Feng reached out and put his hand on Ding of Shenzhou. The purple gas in the cauldron tumbled, and finally, the white gas was completely expelled. Xianlin Taoist, who was still fighting with Wang Lin's great devil doppelganger and Sangqian Dao Jian, saw this scene, and his usually indifferent eyes showed a rare look of astonishment. His demonic dragon doppelganger, what was that energy fluctuation that suddenly erupted from its body? Xianlin Dao Master took a deep breath and said, although it's only a short interval, it can actually faintly restrain my Taishu mysterious light? The all-sky Taishu light, the last formula of the 9 heavens of Taishu technique, was mysterious and unpredictable. Before Lin Feng's Xianmen heavenly escape appeared, and before the divine monkey appeared to be a great demon, It was the only divine sense that could avoid the Dharma-ending catastrophe in the world of Tianyuan. Apart from avoiding the Dharma-ending catastrophe, the all-sky Taishu light had many other magical uses, and it had always been the top great Tao divine sense in the divine land. When Shoichi Daishin used it, even powers like Ding of Shenzhou and the Yin and Yang formation would instantly go out of control and be controlled by the all-sky Taishu light. But today, it was vaguely broken by his opponent. What made Shoichi Daishin and Xianlin Taoist awestruck was that the method Lin Feng used to affect the all-sky Taishu light just now was not to break it by force, but to use a divine sense that was similar to the all-sky Taishu light, but completely different. What on earth is that? Even the big shots of Taishu Temple like Shoichi Daishin and Xianlin Taoist looked at Lin Feng at this moment, and for a moment, they felt that he was mysterious. Chapter 10:18. Shoichi Daishin lowered his head and glanced at the wound on his right arm. Spots of pale golden light scattered from it, like spots of blood. His expression was calm as usual, but his gaze became increasingly quiet and deep. Come to think of it, this was already the second time he had been injured by Lin Feng. However, compared to the previous battle in West Hill City, he was more concerned this time. This was because the other party's methods were completely beyond his expectations. Even now, Shoichi Daishin could not fully understand the sudden change in Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger just now. What was going on? It's vaguely related to the power of the stars in the universe, but it's not as simple as drawing upon the power of the stars. The method he used to draw upon the power of the stars is the key. Many thoughts flashed through Shoichi Daishin's mind. Using this method to take in the stars for his own use and then produce other changes. Although he still did not understand it, at Shoichi Daishin's level, some superficial things could be seen clearly. This method is very strange. It seems to be of the same origin as his remarkable ability of turning the world back to its origin and reversing the universe. Thinking of this, Shoichi Daishin's eyes narrowed slightly. First, it's the method that restrains Taishu Temple. Next, it's the Taishu mystic light that targets my temple. Are these all coincidences? There are thousands of paths, but they all lead to the same destination. The higher one goes, the more it's like this. It's fine if these are all coincidences, but if not. Xianlin Taoist's gaze also fell on the wound on Shoichi Daishin's right arm. His heart was a little heavy. The one here is still not the true body of the master of Xianmen. Although Ding of Shenzhou had sided with Lin Feng and attacked Shoichi Daishin together, the strength that Lin Feng had displayed in this battle still shocked Xianlin Taoist. His gaze fell on the right front claw of Lin Feng's Brontosaurus clone. He saw that the dragon claw had regained its silvery white color. That was definitely the dragon claw of a pure-blooded primordial sky dragon. It's the power of a Dharma-ending realm demon dragon. Back then he broke Long Kuan's claw, so he refined it into his clone. Previously, when he fought against the Nine Light Sky Shattering Formation and the Great Sage, he didn't reveal his true strength. This person is really scheming. Has he revealed his full strength now? How many more tricks does he have up his sleeve? At this moment, Lin Feng, who was in front of Shoichi Daishin and Xianlin Taoist, had a calm expression. The Brontosaurus clone had retracted his true form and transformed back into his human form. He also stood beside Ding of Shenzhou. Shoichi Daishin's expression was calm. He wasn't depressed. Silently, he looked at Ding of Shenzhou and slowly said, "The king of the underworld, who plotted to kill Xia Huang in China, was deposed and overthrown by the ancient emperor and the patriarch of this temple in ancient times. Your Excellency is also related to this temple. Please reconsider. This temple deeply regrets the death of His Majesty Xia Huang. It was completely unexpected." Ding of Shenzhou was silent. He didn't react to Shoichi Daishin's words. Lin Feng's God of War clone stood at the side. His left hand was placed on Ding of Shenzhou, and his right hand was making a hand seal. Inside the huge Ding of Shenzhou cauldron, purple qi suddenly surged endlessly. Lin Feng said calmly, "Ding of Shenzhou, you are a creation artifact. Although your primordial spirit will is grand and not obvious, you have a complete self-consciousness. You decide for yourself where to go. Wang Lin's great devil clone returned to Lin Feng's side and smiled. What happened before had already shown that Ding of Shenzhou would definitely not choose Taishu Temple if other conditions were the same. Even if Taishu Temple's other conditions were better, Ding of Shenzhou might not be able to gain Ding of Shenzhou's approval. Xianlin Taoist said silently, "The king of the underworld, who killed Xia Huang in the past, has been resurrected. Both this temple and this Xianmen sect master have the intention to eliminate him." Ding of Shenzhou was slightly shaken. Xianlin Taoist continued, "His current whereabouts are hard to determine. However, this temple already has some clues." Lin Feng looked at Xianlin Taoist and thought to himself, as expected, they also suspect that the king of the underworld's whereabouts are related to the Netherworld Sea. I wonder how much they know about the Netherworld Sea? Shoichi Daishin and Xianlin Taoist's expressions did not change at all. They knew that Xianmen Tianzong had connections with the ancient immortals world. The news that the Netherworld Sea in the ancient immortals world had suddenly split open was suspected to be related to the king of the underworld. Lin Feng most likely had some channels to learn about it. Thus, he did not care about the news being leaked. After all, it was not a special secret that someone in Taishu Temple could activate the power of the Netherworld Sea. Just 5 years ago in the vast Thousand Domains, Wu Mingqi, a member of Taishu Temple's Grand Supreme Elders Guild, was forced to activate the power of the Netherworld Sea in order to defend against the demon race's attack on Taihua Mountain in Infinite Wasteland. In the end, although he temporarily defended Taihua Mountain until Lord Tai and the others returned from the Spirit Sea, Taihua Mountain itself was flooded into a dead land. All these years, Taishu Temple had been guiding the White Cloud Mountain's Tianyi True Water to cleanse Taihua Mountain. Although it was effective, it was still not completed, and Taihua Mountain had been restored to its original state. And what was worth noting was that before Wu Mingqi, it was rumored that there was also someone in Taishu Temple who could activate the power of the Netherworld Sea. It was just that it was a long time ago. Other than the people inside Taishu Temple, very few people in the outside world knew about the specific situation. Although there are many disasters in the Netherworld Sea, there are also some precious things. Not to mention other things, the power of the Nether Evil Flame and the 9 Nether Een Wind. If one manages to control these powers, it will definitely be extremely powerful. However, I have never seen a cultivator of Taishu Temple controlling them. Lin Feng thought to himself, is it really that they have not mastered it, or is it because they have not released it? If they really have not mastered it, then what is the reason? How did the Grand Supreme Elder of Taishu Temple, who could activate the power of the Netherworld Sea, do this? When Ding of Shenzhou heard Shoichi Daishin's words, it trembled slightly and let out low hums that echoed in the starry sky. It was a creation Dharma treasure refined by Xia Huang, but its independence far surpassed that of spirit nurturing, transformation, or Mahayana-grade Dharma treasures. After Xia Huang's death, as long as he was unwilling, it would be difficult for anyone to subdue him. To Ding of Shenzhou, Xia Huang's death could be said to be important, but it could also be said to be insignificant. As a creation Dharma treasure, Ding of Shenzhou's thoughts and will were between an intelligent life and a world of creation. It had emotions, but they could not completely control it. When it made decisions, it was more in accordance with the great Tao of heaven and earth. It was in accordance with the principles of the boundless universe, and also in accordance with the principles of the world of creation that it had created. Therefore, although it showed disgust towards Shoichi Daishin, Ding of Shenzhou's disgust was not strong. However, when the other conditions were not too different, the disgust towards the king of the underworld and the Taishu Temple would make Ding of Shenzhou's decisions appear biased. Lin Feng looked at the trembling Ding of Shenzhou and smiled. His consciousness and will communicated with it. Whether it is Taishu Temple or I, we both have a clue about the whereabouts of the king of the underworld, and this clue lies in the Netherworld Sea. Both I and Taishu Temple have an equal chance. How you want to deal with it, Your Excellency, please decide for yourself. Ding of Shenzhou's trembling suddenly stopped. A majestic will connected with Lin Feng's consciousness, but it did not ask any questions. It only calmly contacted Lin Feng. Lin Feng faced it calmly. He did not lie to Ding of Shenzhou. Although he did not know how much Taishu Temple knew about the Netherworld Sea, based on the information he had at hand, Taishu Temple might not have as many clues as he did. Although the clues he had at hand were still on paper, Lin Feng did not hide anything from Ding of Shenzhou. Ding of Shenzhou and his consciousness were connected. With Lin Feng's permission, he could know if Lin Feng was being honest or not. As for how Ding of Shenzhou would decide, that was up to Ding of Shenzhou. However, Ding of Shenzhou did not disappoint Lin Feng. The boiling purple qi in the cauldron suddenly calmed down. There were no waves in the cauldron, like the calm surface of the water. Soon, a circle of ripples appeared on the surface of the water, and many figures flew out. Qin Xingyu, Guochayang, Mu Xian, Hexagonal Sword, Zhao Mingxiu, Shan Xiang, Yang Zhao, Ding Runfeng, Fan Xiefeng, everyone from Taishu Temple was thrown out by Ding of Shenzhou. In Ding of Shenzhou, in the midst of the purple qi, Kai Fengzhou put away the magic cloud stance. He smiled bitterly as he felt the whole world rejecting him. In the end, he shook his head and did not move, allowing Ding of Shenzhou to send him out. If he tried to resist it, he would have to face the suppression of the creation Dharma treasure, Ding of Shenzhou. Outside Ding of Shenzhou, seeing that Kai Fengzhou was also sent out by Ding of Shenzhou, Shoichi Daishin and Xianlin Taoist did not feel embarrassed. Instead, they sighed in their hearts. Whether it was Ding of Shenzhou and Lin Feng teaming up to fight Shoichi Daishin and Taishu Temple, or him sending Kai Fengzhou and the other cultivators from Taishu Temple out, it was all related to the karma of the past. Revenge breeds revenge, and it is hard to say what is good or bad. What Xia Huang said is not without reason, but it is really a pity. Shoichi Daishin had also witnessed the light and shadow of Ding of Shenzhou. When he thought of Xia Huang's sigh at that time, he felt the same way. However, this feeling was fleeting for him. For Jingyi, he began to think about what would happen if Ding of Shenzhou fell into the hands of Lin Feng and Xianmen Tianzong. If no major accidents occur, the Void Temple's hopes of seizing the Divine God Cauldron from Lin Feng's hands right now is already extremely slim. On one hand, it was because Lin Feng's strength had once again exceeded their expectations. On the other hand, it was because Ding of Shenzhou had made his own decision. It was simply too difficult to make a creation magic treasure change its mind, or to say, force a creation magic treasure to do so. At least for Taishu Temple's current strength in the Sea of Stars, with Lin Feng standing by, it was too difficult to change Ding of Shenzhou's mind. It was almost hopeless. For Shoichi Daishin, Xianlin Taoist, and the others, it was absolutely a terrible thing for Ding of Shenzhou to fall into the hands of Lin Feng and Xianmen Tianzong. Xianmen Tianzong was already in a period of rising strength. If Ding of Shenzhou was used, it would certainly have an even more obvious boost, which would further increase Xianmen Tianzong's strength. The Divine Land had now become a widespread consensus. The only factor restricting Xianmen Tianzong's progress was time. The existence of Ding of Shenzhou would greatly eliminate the hindrance of time on Xianmen Tianzong. Chapter 10:19. Standing next to Ding of Shenzhou, Lin Feng gently flicked the huge cauldron with his finger, and a few figures flew out from Ding of Shenzhou. With Shi Tianhao in the lead, Yu Hongyan, Li Yuanfang, Luo Qinggu, and a group of younger disciples followed behind him. This was not because they had been expelled from Ding of Shenzhou, but because they had left Ding of Shenzhou under Lin Feng's instructions, while Zhu Yi's Haoyang doppelganger continued to stay in the cauldron. Lin Feng's gaze swept across the people of Taishu Temple, and his eyes lingered on the hexagonal sword for a moment. Who is this treasure working with? Lin Feng asked the disciples behind him through his divine sense. Yu Hongyan answered, it's working with a female disciple of Taishu Temple. She's Pang Jie's disciple. Lin Feng nodded and did not say much, but he felt a little emotional. In the past, when he had just formed his Yuanying, he had personally fought with Pang Jie and the hexagonal sword. At that time, he had just established his own sect, while Pang Jie was the heaven's favored one, an Empyrean wayfarer of Taishu Temple at that time, a dragon among men. After that, they met again in the Yu family's ancestral land. At that time, Pang Jie had cultivated in Bai Yun Mountain and finally succeeded in attaining the primordial soul realm. However, it was all in vain. Not only was their strength different, but their positions were also completely reversed. From then on, those who could communicate with Lin Feng as equals had become Pang Jie's generation like Yen Nanlai, Quang Heng, and Xianlin Taoist. Pang Jie himself was also suppressed by the Taishu Temple because he had left a sacrificial mark on his junior brother's body. Today, Pang Jie was still being suppressed by the Taishu demon suppressing steel. Seeing the hexagonal sword that he always carried with him, the person who guarded the treasure had become his disciple. At this moment, the people who had the same status as Lin Feng had become the previous generation elders of the Taishu Temple like the Supreme Taoist Lord and Shoichi Daishin. The enemies that Lin Feng had fought in the past might not even be a match for his disciple now. Even though Lin Feng's current state of mind was rather stable, he couldn't help but have a trace of the feeling that the world was changing and the world was unpredictable. He did not feel complacent, nor did he feel sad. Although he felt emotional, his state of mind was very calm. If one were to ask him what he was thinking at this moment, it would be a simple sentence: sailing against the current. If you don't advance, you will fall back. It was the same for others and for himself. Lin Feng looked at Shoichi Daishin, Xianlin Taoist, and Kai Fengzhou, and said calmly, "The opening of the Star Tomb is coming to an end. The matter here just happened to be settled, so it's time to rush over. I'll go ahead first, you three Taoist friends." After saying that, Lin Feng used his magic power to sweep away everyone except Shi Tianhao and Wang Lin. The God of War clone withdrew the yin and yang life and death formation, carried Ding of Shenzhou, and fled into the distance with the Brontosaurus clone. In that direction, the starlight was dazzling and completely connected, turning into an ocean of starlight, vast and mysterious. Looking at his departing figure, Kai Fengzhou smiled bitterly and bowed to Shoichi Daishin. "Martial Uncle Shoichi, I've let you down." Shoichi Daishin shook his head. "It's not your fault." The myriad of emotions in Xianlin Taoist's eyes dissipated, leaving only calmness. "Martial Uncle, what about the Star Tomb?" Although he did not say much, the primordial spirits of the arcane formation breaking drum and the void yin-yang bell, Grand Drum Immortal and yin-yang Elder, were standing behind him at this moment. Either one of them was an elite among Mahayana-grade treasures, and they were even more powerful than the vast majority of Dao integration stage cultivators. However, for a considerable period of time, they could no longer transform into the creation arcane treasure Taishu Temple. Once they disintegrated, it would take a long time before they could merge again. Shoichi Daishin was also slightly injured at this moment, and the power of the Taishu Temple in the Star Ocean had actually decreased instead of increasing. If they could subdue Ding of Shenzhou, they could naturally make up for their losses, and their strength would increase. However, the result now was that Lin Feng obtained Ding of Shenzhou, and his strength increased, while the Taishu Temple's strength decreased. Opening the Star Tomb required at least 4 Star Ocean gates, and there would definitely be a large number of great demons gathering in the Star Tomb at this moment. It was unknown how much Shoichi Daishin and the others could reap if they rushed over there. If they could obtain Ding of Shenzhou, then the Taishu Temple would have a much greater chance of success. The current situation in the Star Ocean was that the Taishu Temple had not been able to completely control the situation, and it was getting increasingly out of control. Shoichi Daishin's left hand touched his right arm, and the 5 wounds caused by the Brontosaurus's clone disappeared, but he could still vaguely feel some uncoordinated aura on his body. Although his injuries were temporarily suppressed, it would take more than a day to completely cure them. The opening of the Star Tomb is no small matter, and the Dragon Clan is likely to be involved. "Let's go and figure out the truth before making a decision," Shoichi Daishin said, and then waved his hand. The figures of the Supreme Drum Immortal and the yin-yang Elder disappeared, and the Supreme Formation Breaking Drum and the Void yin-yang Bell turned into 2 streams of light, which were rolled up by Shoichi Daishin's sleeves. Then, Shoichi Daishin also walked in the direction of the Star Tomb. Xianlin Taoist and Kai Fengzhou nodded together, and Kai Fengzhou used his powers to sweep up the younger disciples, and then he and Xianlin Taoist followed behind Shoichi Daishin, shoulder to shoulder. "What's the truth?" Xianlin Taoist asked calmly. Guo Chaoyang answered in a deep voice, reporting to Martial Granduncle, "Brother 1 was killed by Xianmen Tianzong's disciple, Tang Jun. Kai Fengzhou frowned. What's the reason? Guo Qiaoyang did not try to cover up his mistakes, and he told Kai Fengzhou and Xianlin Taoist everything Yang Zhao had told him. After listening to Guo Qiaoyang's narration, Kai Fengzhou looked up to the sky and sighed. Xianlin Taoist was expressionless. He was a disciple of our temple, and regardless of whether he was right or wrong, we have our own rules to deal with him. Now that he was killed by Xianmen Tianzong's disciple, it is intolerable. From now on, disciples of our temple below the primordial spirit realm will have an additional trial, and that is to kill Xianmen Tianzong's disciple, Tang Jun, in a fair challenge. The trial mission level is medium A. If Tang Jun forms his nascent soul, the trial level will be automatically upgraded to medium A. Those who have completed this trial must report to me directly. Tang Jun killed Wan Zhengluan in a situation where he had to fight against 3 people at the same time. Therefore, if the successor of Taishu Temple wanted to get back at him, he would have to take revenge in a fair one-on-one challenge at the very least. Besieging him, plotting against him, ambushing him, and so on, would make him lose face. As for a fair and open challenge, as long as the gap between the 2 parties' realms was not too big, there was nothing much to say. However, this time, Taishu Temple had been aiming for a fight to the death from the very beginning. At the same time, given Tang Jun's past achievements, it would be extremely difficult for Taishu Temple's disciples to kill him one-on-one. There was even a high possibility that they would be killed by Tang Jun instead. Taoist Xianlin has clearly stated that if Tang Jun forms his nascent soul, then this training mission's grade will be A+. This is the highest difficulty level of the Taishu Temple's training mission for disciples below the primordial spirit stage. It was the most difficult and also the most dangerous. Since ancient times, A+ grade training missions have never been seen much in the Void Temple to begin with, and those able to complete them are even rarer. In the last few thousand years, the only Taishu Temple disciple who had completed medium A missions when his cultivation was below the primordial spirit realm was Lin Daohan. Generally speaking, although the trial arrangements for disciples below the primordial spirit realm were arranged by the Taishu Temple's primordial spirit realm seniors, they would certainly not bother a Grand Supreme Elder like Xianlin Taoist. Even Xianlin Taoist's own personal disciple, Pang Jie, was the same in the past. But this time, not only would Xianlin Taoist personally set the trial targets, the disciples who had completed the trial could also directly report to him. While the younger disciples of Taishu Temple were excited, most of them were solemn. Although they were very envious, after they calmed down, most of their gazes fell on Qin Xingyu and Guo Qiaoyang. Putting aside the other disciples of Taishu Temple at the moment, among the successors in the Sea of Stars, with Mu Xian's Dharma form broken, only Qin Xingyu and Guo Qiaoyang had the highest hopes. After all, Shan Xiang, who was in the middle Yuaning realm, was no match for Tang Jun. Although Qin Xingyu and Guo Qiaoyang were only in the early Yuaning realm, their strength was above Shan Xiang's. Without a certain level of strength, it was unknown whether they could survive, let alone complete the trial. Guo Qiaoyang and Qin Xingyu did not say much, only bowing respectfully. When Xianlin Taoist was speaking, Kai Fengzhou did not interrupt. He had been silent all along. Now, he said, everyone should focus on cultivating. The trial mission set by the temple can be accepted by everyone, and everyone should use it as a goal to hone themselves. Shan Xiang, Fan Xiefeng, Zhao Mingxiu and the others heard this. They were all shocked. They quickly nodded in agreement. Kai Fengzhou shook his head. He did not say anything more to the younger disciples, but used his mana to transmit his voice to Xianlin Taoist. In the cultivation of the younger disciples, Xianmen Tianzong has the potential to catch up. Xianlin Taoist did not say anything. He let out a rare sigh. After a while, he replied to Kai Fengzhou, "That is why I set this trial mission. It would be best if someone could complete it. Even if no one could, I hope that it can serve as a spur to encourage others." Although this was what he said, Kai Fengzhou could hear the desolation in his voice. Although their positions and ideas were different, they had known each other for many years. Kai Fengzhou knew that for Tao Master Xianlin, who had always been eager to excel, it was a helpless and frustrating thing for him to set a task for his junior disciple, but he was not sure that his disciple could complete it. He hoped that it could spur and motivate his disciple. Although the situation is getting out of control and the chances of success are getting smaller, there is still a chance. The desolation in Xianlin Taoist's eyes quickly disappeared. He became calm again, his mentality straightened. Especially Ding of Shenzhou, this treasure is too important. Kai Fengzhou nodded, admitting that what Xianlin Taoist said was right. For the Taishu Temple, Ding of Shenzhou was a magic treasure of creation. On the one hand, it could be used to refine pills and medicines, and on the other hand, it was extremely powerful in fights of magical powers. After all, magic treasures of creation were hard to come by, and in most cases, a human expert in the Dharma-ending realm would more or less be at a disadvantage when facing a great demon of the Dharma-ending realm. After the great demon revealed its true form, its strength would be greatly enhanced. It would be fine if we could get Ding of Shenzhou, but if Ding of Shenzhou ultimately falls into the hands of Xianmen Tianzong, then the original plan must be carried out as soon as possible. Silently, Xianlin Taoist said, when we return from the Sea of Stars, we have to conduct a search of the battlefield in the void. Chapter 10:20. Hearing Xianlin Taoist's words, Kai Fengzhou fell silent for a moment, then slowly said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" This was the final decision reached at the Supreme Elders meeting. Junior brother Kai, you abstained from voting, so when it is finally implemented, you can stay out of it. Silently, Xianlin Taoist said, there are right and wrong decisions, but there are only good and bad methods, not right or wrong. This is the most feasible method. Kai Fengzhou sighed, there has been no news of them all these years. Perhaps they have already fallen into the hands of the Underworld Hall, but they have kept it a secret and are waiting for the right time. Xianlin Taoist nodded. That's possible, but we need to make a final confirmation. If possible, I hope we can mobilize the Haotian Mirror to conduct a search. If we don't attack, it shouldn't delay the recovery of the Haotian Mirror, but we will need to expend more energy. Kai Fengzhou didn't say anything more, but simply replied, when I am needed, I will participate. As the two talked along the way, they had already neared the edge of the star graveyard. In front of them was a sea of light, and the specks of starlight were like undulating waves rolling endlessly. Shoichi Daishin, Xianlin Taoist, and Kai Fengzhou all looked into the distance. Lin Feng and his disciple had also arrived. Master, the people from Taishu Temple have caught up. Shi Tianhao glanced at Shoichi Daishin and the others and said with a smile. Lin Feng smiled, it's not that they don't have a chance, so they naturally won't give up easily. However, in a situation where they have lost Taishu Temple and Shoichi Daishin has been lightly injured by me, their strength will be affected, and they will be more cautious. Well, they will also be more inclined to strike after the enemy has struck. Lin Feng's gaze swept across the dazzling starry universe in front of him. If we act too early, we won't have enough confidence. If we act too late, we might end up with nothing. We have to know when to stop. This is a test for Shoichi Daishin and the others. Lin Feng carefully observed the star sector. Wang Lin also did the same. After looking around, he slightly frowned. The outskirts are too peaceful, not a single demon can be seen. If they wanted to ambush us, this would instead be suspected of trying to cover things up. It would be too crude. Or could it be that it's just a feint, a diversion? They will definitely guard against us and the Taishu Temple. Lin Feng casually said, but there's no need to deliberately set them up in the periphery. That would be sending themselves to our doorstep for us to kill. With the gate of Star C, they are within the range of the Star Tomb. If someone else enters the Star Tomb, the demon race will most likely sense it. As Lin Feng spoke, the Brontosaurus avatar in human form opened its palm, and a thin ray of light extended towards the distant starry sky. Following this ray of light, a huge gate was faintly discernible in the universe. It was pulled by the light and flew towards Lin Feng. On the other side, Shoichi Daishin and the other two big shots of the Taishu Temple saw the gate, and their eyes narrowed slightly. This was naturally the gate of Star C that belonged to Lin Feng. It was pulled close by the Brontosaurus avatar. The Brontosaurus avatar bent his finger and gently tapped on the gate. Immediately, layers of light appeared on the gate of Star C. This light was not dazzling and blazing. Instead, it seemed very gentle. It spread far and wide, connecting with the dazzling sea of stars in front of everyone. The eyes of Lin Feng's Brontosaurus avatar flickered with light, and many colorful scenes appeared. Oh, the gate of the Star Tomb is about to open. I'm afraid I can't wait any longer. Lin Feng frowned slightly and patted the gate of Star C with his palm. Then, the gentle light from the gate shrouded him, Shi Tianhao, and Wang Lin. Lin Feng walked forward and stepped into the dazzling sea of stars in front of him. In the distance, Shoichi Daishin made a hand seal with both hands, and light and shadow appeared above his head. The light was very hazy, as if it was separated by a thin layer of gauze. However, it still gradually condensed into the shape of a round mirror. As soon as this mirror light appeared, the stars in the surrounding universe seemed to stop flashing and fell into stillness. The image that appeared on the surface of the mirror was like a still painting, depicting the magnificent waves of the sea of stars. After being shrouded by this mirror light, Shoichi Daishin, Xianlin Taoist, and Kai Fengzhou also seemed to be covered by a thin layer of gauze, becoming blurry. Only then did the three of them step forward and enter the sea of light where the Star Tomb was. Officially stepping into this sea of starlight, the scene in front of Lin Feng and the others' eyes instantly changed. From the outside, it was a sea of dazzling starlight connecting into one, like a sea of light, and after entering it, what entered their eyes was like a giant palace. Every beam and every pillar was extremely huge, and it was difficult to estimate their length with the naked eye. If Wang Lin's great devil avatar fully spread out, it would be tens of thousands of feet tall, but standing in the middle of this palace, he still seemed very small. All the structures of the palace were formed by the condensation of starlight. The starlight was so condensed that it was no different from a physical body. It was just that the palace was desolate and ancient, and the structure's appearance looked very strange from the current point of view. Moreover, it didn't conform to the human race's aesthetics of palaces and pavilions. However, on this palace building, there were constantly flowing light patterns, which made people sigh in admiration. It was as if the stars in the sky were moving together, mysterious and unfathomable, filled with the endless mysteries of the Tao of heaven and earth. Lin Feng looked at those light patterns, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. As expected of the name Star Tomb. After careful observation, Lin Feng discovered that even though the flow of these light patterns was like stars moving and orbiting in the universe, but the final direction was all the fate of destruction. The principle contained in these light patterns was that the stars had the longest lifespan in the world, and in the process of the stars moving and the galaxy moving, pointed to destruction, pointed to the final destination of the universe. Not only was this palace incomparably tall, but the area it occupied was also very large. One palace was like a world of its own. Lin Feng and the others looked over, only to see layers of palaces, and they couldn't see the end. At this moment, they were still in the periphery of the Star Tomb, and there was still quite a distance from the true Star Tomb. The group walked forward, and Shi Tianhao touched the starry gate that came with them. After sensing for a moment, he said curiously, "The people from Taishu Temple didn't come in?" Lin Feng smiled and shook his head. "I'm afraid they have already come in." Shi Tianhao and Wang Lin looked at each other. They didn't touch the restrictions of the Star Tomb? I can't feel their existence through the starry gate. Lin Feng said lightly, "Don't look down on the Haotian mirror. This treasure has many magical uses, and it has many functions. History has proven many times that this magic treasure can still play a role even if it is separated by the boundary power of two worlds, but the effect will be weakened. Some people only see the powerful killing power of this treasure and ignore the other magical uses. And some people, because they haven't seen its powerful destructive power with their own eyes, always think that the Haotian mirror is an auxiliary magic treasure. These two views are biased." Lin Feng smiled slightly. "Let's not talk about the future first. Just from the past and the present, the strength of the perfect and undamaged Haotian mirror is the #1 treasure of Tianyuan. These 5 words are the most appropriate description. Even if it's not perfect, it can't be underestimated. Shi Tianhao asked, Taishu Temple doesn't have a starry gate, so did they enter the sea of stars through the Haotian mirror? Wang Lin pondered for a while and then shook his head. I don't think so. All the previous signs show that the monster race is also surprised that Taishu Temple can enter the desolate ancient star ocean. At the same time, after the Great Ancient Era, there has been no news of Taishu Temple's activities in the desolate ancient star ocean. If they have a stable passage and can enter the desolate ancient star ocean often, there should be some news. From this, it can be seen that Taishu Temple's opportunity to enter the desolate ancient star ocean is not only once, but also very limited. Wang Lin didn't talk much, but he was actually very meticulous. His words always hit the nail on the head. In front of Lin Feng and Shi Tianhao, he wasn't stingy with his words. I'm afraid they used some kind of one-time use treasure to temporarily open a passage to enter here. Shi Tianhao nodded. That's right. This also explains why no other Taishu Temple cultivators came to support them and fight with us for Ding of Shenzhou. The master and disciples walked together, passing through many halls and pavilions. Suddenly, the area before them widened. In a large open space, a high platform made of starlight appeared in front of Lin Feng and the others. At the four corners of the platform, there were 4 huge balls of light flickering with dazzling brilliance. Each of the balls of light was like a huge star, but if one looked closely, they would discover that there was a different scene inside each ball of light. Inside the balls of light, there were specks of starlight moving endlessly. It was like a part of the universe, with countless stars shining inside. Each of the balls of light was like a part of the universe. Next to each of the 4 balls of light, there were several huge figures standing. Next to the ball of light in the east, there was only one figure. He had the face of a human and the body of a leopard. His ears were like a cow's ears, and he only had one eye. He held a long tail in his mouth. He was the great sage Zhu Jian, who had previously surrounded Lin Feng and the others. Next to the ball of light in the west, there were 2 figures. One had wings on his back and was covered in the fur of a hedgehog. He looked like a cow and a tiger, and his aura was extremely fierce. He was the great sage Zhongzhi. The other figure had a majestic and proud aura. His entire body was dark blue, and he dragged a gorgeous tail behind him. His body glowed with a 5-colored light. He was the great sage Pifao. Next to the ball of light in the south, there was also a big demon. Its entire body was dark yellow, and it emitted a faint golden light. It was unknown how long it was. It had the head of a cow, the antlers of a deer, the eyes of a shrimp, the ears of an elephant, the neck of a snake, the claws of a phoenix, and the paws of a tiger. Its entire body was shrouded in a thick dragon's might and auspicious clouds, giving off a feeling as heavy as the earth. It was a yellow dragon. Next to the ball of light in the north, there was also only one figure. However, the pressure and deterrence he exuded was the strongest among all the big demons present. He had black fur, scarlet eyes, and his breathing seemed to stir up the wind and clouds. He was the current clan leader of the primordial demon ape clan, the Great Sage. At this moment, the eyes of the few big demons were fixed on the high platform that was surrounded by the 4 balls of light. A chain extended from each of the balls of light, and it was connected to the top of the high platform. There was a 4-sided spire on the top. At this moment, this 4-sided spire began to slowly open from the top of the spire. 4 triangular faces spread out in all directions, like a flower bud blooming. Dazzling light shot up into the sky from the center. Chapter 1021. The beam of light that soared into the sky reached the top of the hall and connected with it like a heavenly pillar. This huge beam of light constantly spread in all directions and gradually enveloped the entire platform. There was light flowing ceaselessly within the beam of light, constantly shuttling back and forth. Within this pillar of light, sparkling crystals emerged from within and rose together. Those sparkling crystals were of different shapes and sizes, but one could vaguely see veins in them. They were like the bones of animals. They looked like they were right, but they were not. However, they emitted waves of vigorous and calm spiritual power. They were as vast and majestic as the stars, but much gentler. Those are star remains? Lin Feng's eyes flashed. There's a lot of them, far away. Shoichi Dashin, Xianlin Taoist, and Kai Fengzhou, the three Taishu temple experts, also came to the vicinity of the platform. They looked at the many light spots rising from the beam of light. Kai Fengzhou said in a deep voice, "With such a large number, it seems that the star tomb has not been opened in the past thousands of years since the war between the two worlds." Xianlin Taoist nodded. In the past, 4 star sea gates opened at the same time, and that only happened once. It seems that the demons did not unite to open the star tomb that time, so they all waited until this time. When Lin Feng saw this scene, he knew very well that the demons had temporarily joined forces to open the star tomb to search for treasures because he had a star sea gate in his possession. Since the ancient epoch, human cultivators could once again set foot in the ancient desolate star sea. This clearly touched the nerves of the demons. However, just this shouldn't be enough for them to come to a compromise so quickly, Lin Feng pondered. There's probably another reason why Tenryu Gen succeeded in transcending the intermediate tribulation. His gaze landed on the yellow dragon. It was also a dragon king who had undergone tribulation transcendence, and its demonic power waves were extremely vast. If Lin Feng's guess was right, this should be the yellow dragon race's leader of the primordial sky dragon race, Dragon King Huang Xin. The most well-known talent of the Yellow Dragon clan was their incomparably vigorous demonic power. It was as heavy as the central Wuji Earth, like the Earth. It looked ordinary, but was actually extremely powerful. In terms of pure demonic power, Dragon King Huang Shen was almost on par with the Great Sage, who was in the Last Days realm. If he reached the Dharma-ending realm, his bloodline would be purified and he would become a primordial heavenly dragon like the Kunlun Dragon King. His strength would undergo a drastic change. As an elite of the heavens and earth, the primordial sky dragon had a body of golden light that encompassed many intents. It was not something that was simply pieced together or acquired. Instead, it was an innate divine power that encompassed many great Tao, making it powerful and profound. However, after dragon experts of different races purified their bloodlines to become primordial sky dragons, their innate divine powers of their original kin would be further enhanced. It was clearly more profound than the other concepts they grasped. For example, if Huang Shen Dragon King and Blue Sky Dragon King were to attain the Dharma declining realm and become primordial sky dragons, they would have similar talents and divine powers. However, they would also have different strengths. Huang Shen Dragon King's demonic powers would be more vigorous, while Blue Sky Dragon King's demonic light would have stronger Dharma-breaking abilities. After the Yuan Dragon King successfully passed the tribulation, the other demons naturally felt a sense of crisis and urgency. After all, if the Yuan Dragon King's strength continued to increase, the first to bear the pressure would most likely be the other demons of Tianhuang mainland. The ascension of the new demon emperor would inevitably be accompanied by a mountain of corpses. If not for the dragon race controlling the Xian Sea, and the human experts like Lin Feng and Taishu Temple watching from the side, the other demons might even join forces to attack the dragon race. This was the only way for the dragon race to rule the world again. The Yuan Dragon King and the Kunlun Dragon King were also aware of this. Since they could not do anything to the dragon race for the time being, the other demons could only choose to increase their own strength in the face of the Yuan Dragon King's pressure. The star remains in the star graveyard were the most suitable choice. Although they also wanted to share some of the loot with the dragon race, it was better for everyone to grow than to not grow at all. It was better to gain something than to sit around and do nothing. Moreover, there might be other opportunities in the process of opening the star graveyard. As for whether the dragon race would try to take more, there was no need to worry too much. After all, the Yuan Dragon King had not recovered from the weakened state of the tribulation. The Yuan Dragon King had finally decided to bear with the humiliation for once. Once he made up his mind, he would not easily change it, unless there was something he could not tolerate. Moreover, this was the Star Sea, not the Xian Sea. If the Yuan Dragon King really came in, he might not be able to defeat everyone in his weakened state. After all, Lin Feng had a Star Sea gate, and Taishu Temple also sent people into the Star Sea. To put it bluntly, the human experts were hoping that the Tenryu Gen would come out of the Xian Sea before he fully recovered. Although Dragon King Huang Shen had the usual arrogance of the dragon race, he looked calm at the moment. Obviously, he had no intention of taking more. Arrogance did not mean impatience. To the entire dragon race, Dragon King Huang Shen knew very well what was most important. Moreover, he would not take more, nor would he take less. In any case, he would not be at a disadvantage. Everyone had obtained the same number of star remains, so his clan would definitely benefit the most. This was the pride and confidence of Dragon King Huang Shen and the entire dragon race. They were least afraid of sharing it equally. However, Dragon King Huang Shen was still paying attention to the omnipotent sage at all times. If there was a possibility of a change, it would undoubtedly fall on the omnipotent sage. After all, he was the only expert in the Dharma-ending realm among the demon clan present. He was also a person who was used to being domineering, so he could not be expected to abide by the rules. However, before the great sage could do anything, Lin Feng, Shoichi Daishin, and the others barged in. Dragon King Huang Shen frowned slightly. How did the human cultivators come in? Could it be that a Star Sea gate has fallen into the hands of the human cultivators? His mind turned, and his gaze swept across the Great Sage Peafowl, Great Sage Jiongqi, and Great Sage Zhujian. He immediately understood. Great, no wonder all of them are so anxious to open the Star Tomb. Even heaven-reaching Profound Handle has suddenly become easy to talk to. It turns out that it's not only because of the pressure from the Yuan King, but also because of the problem on the human race's side. The other demons had joined forces to find Dragon King Huang Shen to conspire to open the Star Tomb. Although Dragon King Huang Shen was a little puzzled, he only thought that the Yuan Dragon King's tribulation had caused the Great Sage and the other demons to feel pressured. He did not expect that Lin Feng would actually have a Star Sea gate in his hands. Moreover, Shoichi Daishin and the others had also entered the Star Sea. Almost instantly, Dragon King Huang Shen smelled the scent of a conspiracy. He instinctively felt that he had been tricked by the Great Sage and the others. When Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin saw the initial astonishment on Dragon King Huang Shen's face, they both understood that the Great Sage and the other demons had concealed the news of their encounter and battle with them. They did not inform Dragon King Huang Shen. There was no need to ask to know the malicious intent hidden within. However, Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin did not care about this. This was actually what they wanted. The demons had the idea of using them to deal with the dragon race, but as long as they could lure the Tenryu Gen out of the mysterious sea, they would be more than happy to do so. There was no communication at all, but Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin rushed toward Dragon King Huang Shen at the same time. The two did not lack planning and patience, but they also did not lack decisiveness. If the Yuan Dragon King could not hold it in and left the mysterious sea to enter the Star Ocean, that would naturally be the best. If he continued to carry on the old dragon's shell, then leaving Dragon King Huang Shen in the Star Ocean would also weaken the dragon race. If the Yuan Dragon King did not come, it would be the same even if the Kunlun Dragon King came. Previously, they did not know that the Yuan Dragon King was going through a tribulation. Now that they knew, whether it was Lin Feng or Shoichi Daishin, they would try to weaken the dragon race as much as possible while the situation was under control. To the Great Sage and the other demons, although it was acceptable for the dragon race to be weakened, they would not be happy to see the human race becoming stronger. The human race and the dragon race would exhaust each other, and both sides would suffer. This would allow them to fight for more time and space to develop. Therefore, the Great Sage and the other demons did not add insult to injury, but they did not help Dragon King Huang Shen either. Instead, they focused on collecting the star remains, and at the same time, they observed Dragon King Huang Shen's situation. But Dragon King Huang Shen was after all not an ordinary person. Suddenly facing the surprise attack of Lin Feng and the Righteous One, he made a prompt decision, directly giving up on the star remains that were about to fall into his hands without the slightest hesitation. The moment he realized the problem, he immediately revealed his true form. A strange pattern flashed on the forehead of his true form. The pattern instantly covered his entire body, and then it emitted a dazzling radiance. Within the radiance, there was no end to it, and it flashed with black light. The color of the sea was pure gold, and the light shone on the great hall that everyone was in. The mysterious sea. Lin Feng could not help but be slightly stunned. He had seen this scene once before. 5 years ago, he went to the vast land of infinite wasteland and fought with Golden Cicada and the Kunlun Dragon King. In the end, the Kunlun Dragon King took the Blue Sky Dragon King and retreated with the help of the mysterious sea. But only dragons in the Dharma-ending realm should be able to withstand the power of that pattern. Even demons in the Tribulation realm should not be able to withstand it. Lin Feng was not the only one who was stunned. Shoichi Daishin, the Great Sage Qiongqi, Great Sage Xu Jian, Great Sage Pifao, and other experts were all stunned for a moment. As the light flashed, it was not the true mysterious sea that descended. However, the light wrapped around Dragon King Huang Shen and disappeared. Lin Feng carefully felt the light and compared it with the scene he remembered last time. His eyes narrowed slightly. This pattern has been modified and is more profound. It can be carved on the bodies of demons in the Tribulation realm. Was it done by Tenryu Zhen? Thinking about it, Lin Feng understood. The Yuan Dragon King had gradually recovered from the Tribulation decay, and his strength had indeed increased in all aspects. Apart from the increase in his own strength, his research and understanding of the mysterious sea had also deepened. A long time ago, there had been demons in the dragon tribe who had experienced the Tribulation decay, but nothing like this had happened. It seemed like the longer they occupied the mysterious sea, the deeper the dragon tribe's understanding and control of the mysterious sea. When the Yuan Dragon King successfully experienced the Tribulation decay, they finally began to accumulate their strength. Out of the 4 light spheres in the hall, only 3 were left. The star tomb gradually showed signs of closing, and the hall began to shake. The expressions of the Great Sage and the other demons changed slightly. They began to search for the star remains as quickly as possible. At the same time, they stared at Lin Feng, Shoichi Daishin, and the others. Although it was only Lin Feng's clone in front of them, and Shoichi Daishin was the only top demon in the Taishu Temple, after the battle between Lin Feng, the Kuan Dragon King, and Golden Cicada, it was within everyone's expectations that Huang Shen Dragon King did not continue to fight head-on and retreated decisively. However, they did not expect that Huang Shen Dragon King could escape with the power of the mysterious sea just like the Kuan Dragon King did. His speed was unimaginably fast, and he disappeared without even exchanging blows with Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin. As a result, Lin Feng and Tao Master Righteous One's gazes also landed on the group of big demons. After a short pause, the two of them, who had not spoken to each other at all, chose the same target at the same time. This target was beyond the expectations of all the great demons. It turned out to be the strongest among the demons present, the omnipotent sage. Chapter 1022. Dragon King Huang Shen's unexpected escape put the Great Sage Xu Jian, and the other demons in an awkward position. Especially the Great Sage Xu Jian, who felt a chill in his heart. Among the demon forces present, the Great Sage Qiongqi and the Great Sage Pifao were both subordinates of the Golden Rock Great Sage. They could help each other, and the Great Sage was undoubtedly the strongest. Only the Great Sage Xu Jian was alone. The Heavenly Wolf Great Sage had been gouged out by Lin Feng. Not only did he lose an eyeball, but his original demon body and demon soul were also damaged. He had already returned to Infinite Wasteland to recuperate. At this moment, the Great Sage Xu Jian was the only one left in the Star Sea. Without a doubt, after Dragon King Huang Shen left, the Great Sage Xu Jian was the weakest. However, the target that Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin had chosen was unexpected. They did not target the weakest Great Sage Xu Jian, but the strongest, the Great Sage. This caused the great demons to be confused at first. The Great Sage was furious and felt humiliated. However, his anger only lasted for a moment. Very soon, the omnipotent sage came to a realization. Their goal is not the star remains in the star graveyard. They don't even pursue killing. What they want is the star sea gate. Among the great demons present, the omnipotent sage was a great demon in the Dharma-ending realm and the current leader of the primordial demonic ape clan. Although he was the strongest, it was precisely because he was the leader of the ape clan that the star sea gate belonging to the ape clan was under his personal control. Although the light balls in the star graveyard were working together to open the star sea gate, these light balls were not the star sea gate itself. Instead, they were projections of the star sea gate that the experts of the demon clan used their own demon powers to guide over. The gate itself was not here. The dragon race's gate of Star Sea was naturally in the hands of the Yuan Dragon King. The gate of Star Sea that the great sage Zhu Jian used to receive power was personally controlled by the enchantress. The gate of Star Sea that the great sage Jiongqi and the great sage Pifao used to enter and exit the Star Sea was also in the hands of the great sage Golden Rock. Whether it was Dragon King Huang Shen, great sage Zhu Jian, great sage Jiongqi, or great sage Pifao, although they were using the power of the gate of Star Sea to open the Star Tomb, the gate of Star Sea was not actually in their hands. The real masters of the gate of the Sea of Stars were the Yuan Dragon King, the enchantress, and the Golden Rock Great Sage. Only the omnipotent sage, the master of the Star Sea Gate of the Ape Clan, was in the star graveyard. Although the sphere of light beside him was also a projection of the power of the Gate of Stars, the actual location of the gate was not here. However, through the Great Sage, he could naturally find the Gate of Stars. Therefore, although there was no communication, Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin rushed toward the Great Sage at the same time. Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin were caught off guard when Dragon King Huangshen was suddenly taken away by the power of the Xianxi. However, they quickly adjusted their target. They chose the Great Sage mainly because only the Great Sage's Gate of Star Sea was convenient to seize. At the same time, seizing the Star Sea Gate of the ape race was also very beneficial to the future development of the situation. Regardless of individual strength, the ancestral land of the primordial demon ape race, Spirit Abyss Mountain, was extremely powerful. Although it was not as powerful as the Xianxi, it was still very impressive. If the Enchantress and the Golden Rock Great Sage lost their Gate of Star Sea, it would be very difficult for them to seize the primordial demon ape race's Gate of Star Sea. If there was a fight between them, the dragon race and the ape race would be happy to watch from the sidelines and reap the benefits. On the other hand, if the great sage lost his Gate of Star Sea and wanted to find a stable channel to enter the desolate ancient Star Sea, he could not afford to offend the Yuan Dragon King and the Xianxi. However, he would have his eyes on the Enchantress and the Golden Rock Great Sage. Previously, he had a Gate of Star Sea. Although the great sage longed for other people's Gates of Star Sea, he would not be too keen on it. However, if he lost his own Gate of Star Sea and could not get it back in a short period of time, he would naturally have his eyes on others. If this could cause an internal conflict among the demon race, the human race experts would naturally be happy to see it happen. Moreover, the bigger the conflict, the more chaotic the situation, the better it would be. The more demons involved, the better. Therefore, there was no need for communication at all. Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin targeted the Great Sage. Even if they could not kill him here, they would have to take his Gate of Star Sea. Although he had figured out the reason, the Great Sage was still furious. As he roared, his body expanded, and he directly revealed his true form. However, although he was powerful, the people attacking him were even more powerful. Lin Feng's God of War doppelganger put his palms together and then separated them. The Yin and Yang life and death formation and Ding of Shenzhou appeared in the void at the same time, and then they attacked the Great Sage together. At the same time, the Brontosaurus doppelganger let out a long roar. Its right front claw had already turned golden, and it clawed at the Great Sage. Shoichi Daishin did not hesitate. Although the Supreme Formation Breaking Drum and the Void Yin-Yang Bell could not transform into the Taishu Temple for the time being, Shoichi Daishin still held up the Void Yin-Yang Bell and reached out to knock on it. Ripples that were visible to the naked eye spread out from the center of the Void Yin-Yang Bell. The ripples were like layers of space, shrouding the great sage. Immediately after, Shoichi Daishin stretched out his other hand and spread his 5 fingers. Streams of light shone from his palm and spread out, like rolling waves. The waves were like a boundless ocean, with stormy waves, tsunamis, and landslides, slamming down on the great sage's head. The great sage roared again and again. His whole body was shrouded in a thick black fog. Only his pair of eyes emitted a scarlet light, which became more and more dazzling. He spread his arms to block Shoichi Daishin and Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger. Then, he suddenly leaped up to avoid Lin Feng's yin and yang formation. But the yin and yang life and death formations suddenly reversed and rolled toward him again. The omnipotent sage glared at it, and his blood-red eyes suddenly changed into a deep black color. 2 beams of intense black light burst out from them and shot toward the yin and yang life and death formation. Wherever the black light passed, the void was completely frozen and collided with Lin Feng's yin and yang formation. But the great sage's leaping body also stopped because of this. Above his head, Ding of Shenzhou smashed down. As the light and shadow flashed, it was as if the whole divine land was pressing down on the great sage. With a bang, the giant cauldron hit the great sage's head heavily. Even though the great sage had revealed his true form and was hit by the magic treasure of creation, Ding of Shenzhou, he was still dizzy and disoriented for a moment. And Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger and Shoichi Daishin had already attacked together. The great sage's eyes flashed with a fierce light. Black chi surged all over his body. As the black fog filled the air, Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin actually couldn't catch the great sage's trace. He was clearly there, but in the perception of their divine senses, there was heavy fog and they couldn't catch him. They could vaguely detect the great sage's location, but it was specious and full of a feeling of unreality. With Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin's current cultivation realm, it could be said that it was extremely rare to have a feeling of uncertainty in their hearts. But now that they were facing the great sage, they really couldn't grasp his true location. However, Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin both looked calm, and their expressions didn't change at all. They still looked as if they had a card up their sleeves. Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger once again became illusory, changing between the majestic flesh and the light and shadow. A scene that shocked the crowd of great demons happened. With Lin Feng's spell, the entire star tomb seemed to shake, and the boundless sea of stars outside also seemed to be affected. Their lowest realm was at the level of astral soul integration. They had sacrificially refined the stars and demon souls into one, and had a deep understanding of the power of the stars. At this moment, something happened that made them collectively suspect that they were hallucinating. The crowd of great demons faintly felt that the trajectory of the stars seemed to have a slight change. The infinite power was added to Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger, and the golden right claw continued to grab at the black fog that enveloped the great sage. It actually broke the black fog, revealing the great sage's slightly stunned face. And on the other side, Shoichi Daishin's body also appeared mysterious, indescribable, and difficult to comprehend, but extremely powerful light. The light was so calm, not dazzling, not resplendent, not shocking, but no one could ignore it. It was the 9 heavens of Taishu, heavenly Taishu mystic light. This time, all the mystic light gathered on Shoichi Daishin's left hand and continued to hit towards the great sage. Where the light went, the black fog surrounding the great sage also kept spreading, accurately locking onto the great sage. The black fog dispersed, revealing the great sage. At this moment, he was actually not far from Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger and was about to pounce. Although he was surrounded, this fierce great demon used the mystic power of the black fog to temporarily buy himself some time to breathe, and directly chose to counterattack, opening up a gap and killing his way out of the siege. Unfortunately, both Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin had ways to dispel his mystic power, and the protective black fog did not buy much time for the great sage. Seeing that his opponent was pouncing on him again, the great sage let out a muffled groan, and a few bright and dazzling stars lit up in the black fog around him. The stars and the black fog merged, combining into rays of black light that surrounded him, helping him resist the attacks of Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin. However, Lin Feng's attacks were like endless waves. With a thought, Ding of Shenzhou and the yin and yang life and death formation also attacked. Ding of Shenzhou pressed down from above, trying to fix the figure of the great sage, and the yin and yang life and death formation was completely unfolded, about to take this great demon into the formation. The fierce light in the great sage's eyes kept flashing. If he was sucked into the yin and yang life and death formation, he knew that Lin Feng, Shoichi Daishin, and Ding of Shenzhou would also enter the formation and attack him. At that time, it would be very difficult for him to escape. When he thought of this, the omnipotent sage suddenly cracked open his mouth and laughed. He opened his mouth, and streams of light spurted out. They were irregular crystals, flashing with gentle starlight. They were the remains of stars he had obtained from the star tomb. The great sage's eyes turned from red to black again. The light shone on the remains of stars, and all the remains of stars were vaporized in an instant, turning into streams of air. At this time, the originally turbulent star tomb suddenly stopped, and the flowing starlight seemed to have also stopped. Shoichi Daishin was slightly stunned, and his pupils suddenly contracted. Star storm! He immediately withdrew his attack and flew backwards. Chapter 1023. Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin's target was the Star Sea Gate. The great sage Zhu Jian, great sage Pi Fao, and great sage Jiangqi quickly understood. This made them relax a little. With the great sage holding back Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin, they had a chance to leave. Dragon King Huang Shun suddenly retreated. Even the light ball projected by the Star Sea Gate beside him disappeared. The formation formed by the 4 Star Sea Gates was missing a corner. The Star Tomb immediately began to collapse. Not only the high platform in the center of the hall, but the entire Grand Hall also began to collapse. The 4 spires on the high platform closed again. However, a large number of star remains had fallen into the hands of the Great Sage Zhu Jian, and the other great demons. Other than Dragon King Huang Shun, who retreated immediately, the 4 great demons had made a lot of money. At this moment, Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin had their eyes on the Great Sage's Star Sea Gate. The Great Sage Zhu Jian, Great Sage Pi Fao, and Great Sage Jiangqi were naturally prepared to retreat. They had no intention of helping the Great Sage. Working together to open the Star Tomb was only a temporary cooperation. However, the Great Sage suddenly released all the star remains he had obtained. This puzzled everyone present. The things that the Celestial Sect of Wonders and the Void Temple are eyeing are all your Star Sea Gate. Even if you give up all of the star remains right now, it won't be able to buy the way. The Great Sage Pi Fao was puzzled. If you just give up the Star Sea Gate, it might cause internal strife between Shenmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple. But releasing the star remains won't be of any use. The Great Sage Jiangqi and Great Sage Zhu Jian were also puzzled. The heavenly profound handle. You don't think that giving up the star remains will make us greedy and come back to snatch them, then help you attract the attention of Shenmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple, do you? Naturally, the Great Sage had no intention of doing so. In fact, he didn't even look at Great Sage Pi Fao and the other great demons. At this moment, his attention was focused on the star skeletons themselves. The light emitted from his eyes turned from red to black and shone on the star skeletons. The star skeletons instantly vaporized and turned into streams of air. The star tomb, which was collapsing non-stop, suddenly fell into a strange silence. Seeing this, Great Sage Pi Fao, Great Sage Zhu Jian, and Great Sage Jiangqi were stunned. Some information emerged from the depths of their memories. They were all great demons with deep foundations. The demons they belonged to had been able to summon wind and rain in the history of the great heaven primordial world. They had produced many experts, and their ancestors had passed down many secrets. However, most of this information was merely hearsay. Great Sage Pi Fao and the other great demons did not have the chance to verify it themselves, so most of the time they would subconsciously ignore it. But as long as there was a hint, they would immediately dig out useful information from the depths of their memories. For example, The star tomb had been controlled by the Yudu race for many years. Ever since the Yudu race had disappeared, the star tomb had never been opened before today. It was the first time Great Sage Pifao, Great Sage Zhujian, and Great Sage Qiongqi had entered the star tomb for the first time. It was also their first time coming into contact with it and seeing it with their own eyes. As such, when they saw the great sage's actions, they suddenly recalled some things. In the 7 seas of heaven primordial world, the dragon race controlled the mysterious sea. They could mobilize the power of the entire mysterious sea to suppress their enemies. There were also rumors that if the 3 mountains of Yingxi fell into the hands of one person, that person would be able to control Yingxi like how the dragon race controlled the mysterious sea. The 7 seas of heaven primordial world each had their own wondrous uses, but they were also extremely powerful powers. However, the star sea was different from the spirit sea, Yingxi, and mysterious sea. In the past, when the human emperor and the demon emperor controlled the star sea, even though there were many other conveniences and uses, the star sea didn't have the power of the entire world to attack or lock onto a single target. It was also because of this that when Ding of Shenzhou had hidden in the star sea, the king of the underworld, the ancient emperor, and the ruthless emperor hadn't noticed him. After the demon race had retaken over the desolate ancient star sea, under the premise that Ding of Shenzhou was in a deep slumber, they hadn't noticed anything. However, nothing was absolute in the world. The star sea wasn't completely without danger, and it wasn't completely without destructive power. It was just that its destructive power wasn't like the mysterious sea and Yingxi, which could be controlled by others freely. Once the star sea exploded, the destruction it caused was an uncontrollable explosion, and the source of this explosion was the star tomb. This information was known to Great Sage Pifao and the other great demons, but they didn't know how to cause the star sea turbulence in the star tomb. After all, although their ancestors had passed down a lot of useful information, none of them had truly ascended to the position of the demon race's Saint Emperor and completely controlled the star sea. However, now that they saw the great sage's actions, and they were in the star tomb, no matter how slow their reactions were, they immediately came to a realization. The few great demons who were originally on the periphery of the battle immediately flew out of the star tomb that was on the verge of collapse. They wanted to get as far away from this place as possible. Although Shoichi Daishin himself had never entered the desolate ancient star sea, his Taishu temple had a deep foundation, and there were many related records and secrets. Therefore, he was able to discern the great sage's intentions immediately. The great sage grinned at Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin. After crushing all the star remains in his hand, he let out a long roar, opened his mouth, and suddenly spat out a shuttle-shaped stone. As soon as the stone appeared in the star sea, it began to emit a shocking aura. The stone projected a silhouette. It was a white ape that stood on its hind legs. Its eyes were blue, and although it looked ordinary, its aura was terrifying. It was in the void, but it didn't seem to exist in this world. It was unfathomable. The tyrannical and majestic power combined with the ethereal aura. It was contradictory yet unified at the same time, making everyone's heart palpitate. There was no need to identify it. Everyone present could tell that this blue-eyed white monkey was one of the 3 strongest Saint Emperors in the history of the demon race, the extreme king of the divine abyss. Although the extreme spirit monkey clan had many strong cultivators, only Jihuang Xinyuan had such a terrifying aura. Just a silhouette was enough to make everyone's heart palpitate. The extreme king's divine abyss had fallen, and the extreme spirit monkey clan had fallen as well. The primordial demon ape clan had returned to the sky demon ape clan, but the extreme king's legacy was still in play. Aside from the powerful spirit abyss mountain, there were other treasures left behind. The stone shuttle in the great sage's hand was obviously left behind by the extreme king. The stone shuttle floated in the air and suddenly shattered. Then the star tomb, which had temporarily stopped collapsing, and the desolate ancient star sea, which seemed to have fallen into a state of stillness, suddenly erupted with even more violent tremors. The great sage's dangerous gaze swept across Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin. He even looked at the great sage Zhu Jian, the great sage Pifao, the great sage Qiongqi, Shi Tianhao, Wang Lin, Xianlin Taoist, and Kai Fengzhou. The light in his eyes suddenly turned blue, and the shattered stone shuttle also turned into a blue light, which merged with the blue light that shot out from the great sage's eyes. The entire star tomb suddenly collapsed, and endless starlight turned into a turbulent flow. It began to gather from all directions, with the star tomb as the center. That terrifying power was like the stars in the sky were destroyed, and billions of starlight were extinguished at the same time. Then they all crushed towards the center. Lin Feng raised his eyebrows slightly. During the battle between the three mountains of Yingxi, he had used the Penglai Celestial Mountain to collide with the great Zhou dynasty's Fangzhang Celestial Mountain, causing a huge wave that swept through the entire southern part of Yingxi. However, the power that erupted was not as terrifying as the current star sea storm. This change was concentrated in the area where the star tomb was located. The area affected was limited, but the destructive power in this area was even more terrifying. The omnipotent sage grinned hideously. Once again, he opened his mouth and spat out another stone shuttle. The stone shuttle emitted a blue light, but it played a defensive role. It protected him and kept him safe in this starry sky domain that had gone completely berserk. Although he could not control the direction of the star sea storm, and he was also under attack, the great sage could still protect himself after creating this turbulence with the help of the extreme king's influence and his own strength. A huge star sea gate appeared beside him, and the gate slowly opened to both sides. The great sage laughed sinisterly. "Don't you want our race's star sea gate? Let's see if you can save your own lives first." Shoichi Daishin immediately gave up on attacking and retreated. As a result, Lin Feng became the person closest to the great sage, and also the person closest to the center of the star tomb. As for the situation of the star sea storm, Lin Feng did not understand it beforehand. However, seeing the actions of Shoichi Daishin and the others, and then looking at the movements around him, he immediately understood what was going on. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. That's why I often say that gathering information is very important. Otherwise, if someone dug a hole in front of you, and you don't even recognize it, they would think that it's a smooth road ahead. Lin Feng still had time to turn his head to look at the great sage Zhu Jian, the great sage Pifao, and the great sage Qiongqi. He saw that the three great demons were not having a good time either. Although they had escaped to the periphery, they were still affected. However, being at the periphery, they were much better off. The closer one was to the center of the star tomb, the more powerful the star sea storm became. Moreover, its power increased exponentially. Although Shoichi Daishin had also retreated in time, his situation was much worse than the great sage Pifao and the others. Protecting Xianlin Taoist and Kai Fengzhou by his side, Shoichi Daishin's expression was also somewhat solemn. Above his head, a hazy light appeared, like a round mirror, protecting the three people in the Taishu temple. Because of Shoichi Daishin's prompt decision, they were further away from the center of the star tomb, and the pressure was also slightly less. Lin Feng nodded. As expected, the foundations of the old sects are often reflected in the inadvertent. The Brontosaurus's clone waved its claw, and the star sea gate that Lin Feng had appeared beside it. However, when it pushed the gate, the star sea gate could not be opened. The surrounding violent starlight actually imprisoned the star sea gate. "How dare you have designs on me? Your two clones and your disciple will all die here." A mocking smile appeared on the great sage's face. The reason he could open the star sea gate was because of the extreme emperor's relic. Otherwise, the star sea gate would also be sealed by the star sea storm. Lin Feng didn't pay attention to the omnipotent great sage. With a thought, he slightly furrowed his brows. "Oh, the explosion of power in the sea of stars this time is too concentrated. It's not like we're in the same world. Even the two-world void technique is somewhat affected." Chapter 1024. Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger rotated around him. His god of war doppelganger, Shi Tianhao, and Wang Lin's great devil doppelganger were all protected by the gigantic dragon's body. The god of war doppelganger's hands changed rapidly, and the yin and yang life and death formation appeared above his head. The formation spread out and covered the surroundings. Countless huge formation patterns were operating rapidly, and together, they formed a huge formation. At the center of the formation, 49 light spots were faintly discernible. Meanwhile, under the feet of Xianmen Tianzong and the others, Ding of Shenzhou released its own light, as if it had turned into a thick and boundless land. The mountains, rivers, and all living things were clearly visible. Lin Feng's god of war doppelganger gently pointed at the yin and yang life and death formation above his head. The formation suddenly changed and turned into a blue sky. It resonated with the power of Ding of Shenzhou under his feet, and vaguely formed a complete world. In this world, Shoichi Daishin, Xianlin Taoist, and Kai Fengzhou, the three big shots of Taishu Temple, saw it and felt their hearts skip a beat. The real divine land seemed to have appeared in front of them. This formation of his can fight against the artifact of creation, let alone Ding of Shenzhou. Now that the power of both sides has joined together, it has become even more powerful, said Xianlin Taoist slowly as he looked at the scene. Kai Fengzhou also nodded. Looking at Lin Feng, who was in the center of the galactic turbulence, enduring the pressure of the star tomb's collapse and the impact of the destructive light of thousands of stars, Kai Fengzhou asked, "Can he hold on?" Xianlin Taoist pondered and did not answer. At this moment, Shoichi Daishin suddenly said, "He can't." Kai Fengzhou and Xianlin Taoist both looked at Shoichi Daishin. Shoichi Daishin's expression was calm, but his eyes were slightly solemn. If his main body is here, there might be a chance, but his doppelganger controlling the formation and Ding of Shenzhou can't hold on. At most, it will be broken by the galactic turbulence in a short while. Xianlin Dao Master murmured to himself, "The last record of our generation of human cultivators about the galactic turbulence is the war between the two realms in the last years of the ancient times. In that war, the galactic turbulence was launched and combined with other forces to shatter the original space passage in the desolate ancient star sea, forming 6 star sea gates." Kai Fengzhou stared at Lin Feng. "Will his main body come here?" Shoichi Daishin said, "Now that the galactic turbulence is at its peak, it is hard to say whether the star sea gate can still be opened. The profound handle that can open the star sea gate probably has something to do with the treasures left behind by extreme spirit of the divine abyss." Xianlin Taoist raised his head and looked at the light of the Haotian mirror that enveloped them. He frowned. Ding of Shenzhou cannot be lost. The same goes for his star sea gate. However, to break through this galactic turbulence, the power of the Haotian mirror needs to be further strengthened, which will delay its recovery. When this galactic turbulence calms down, the star sea gate may not be damaged, but Ding of Shenzhou may be damaged. After a moment of silence, Shoichi Daishin said, "Wait." Upon hearing this, Xianlin Taoist and Kai Fengzhou nodded. Although the sudden galactic turbulence caught everyone off guard, the current situation was not bad for Taishu Temple. The only thing to worry about was whether Lin Feng's main body could come to the star sea gate. However, looking at the confident look on the great sage's face, it was clear that Lin Feng's star sea gate would most likely not be able to open. If Lin Feng's main body could not come, then it seemed that Xianmen Tianzong and the others here would not be able to escape. Ding of Shenzhou, which had just been obtained, would have to say goodbye before it could even warm up. As for Lin Feng's star sea gate, it was very likely that it would be lost in the star sea. Whether it was the great sage or the people of Taishu Temple, they would not be courteous. They would definitely seize the star sea gate before it opened again. At this moment, the great sage looked at Lin Feng with a cold smile. He looked at Xianmen Tianzong and the others, who were like a small boat tossed about in the stormy seas. "You want my star sea gate? Master of the celestial sect of wonders, this time you are the one who wants to leave the star sea gate behind." The great sage opened his mouth, revealing his sharp fangs. "The star sea is the demon race's star sea. How can a human like you occupy the star sea gate? Since you're being so aggressive, I'll give up on the star remains and bury you here. With your star ocean gate, I can make up for my loss." Although the great sage Zhu Jian, the great sage Pi Fao, and the great sage Qiongqi were also affected by the star sea storm, They were on the periphery after all, so the damage was much less. They could still barely hold on, and one by one, they struggled to break away from the periphery. They looked at Lin Feng and his disciple trapped in the center of the Star Sea storm and felt slightly relieved. Earlier, they'd attempted to encircle and kill Lin Feng and his disciple to seize the door of Star, yet they were almost killed instead and could only flee in the end, causing all the greater demons to feel extremely depressed, and it was difficult for them to calm the resentment in their hearts. It would have been fine if they were facing Lin Feng himself, but it was clear that only 2 of Lin Feng's clones and a few of his disciples had entered the Star Sea. However, the final result was that the 6-horned Great Sage was killed on the spot by the Yin and Yang life and death formation. The Great Sage tried to save him, but he could not. The Heavenly Wolf Great Sage, who ran amok in planet Tianhuang, had his eye dug out by Lin Feng. In order to deal with Lin Feng's Yin and Yang life and death formation, even the Great Sage Zhu Jian was forced to use his trump card, which greatly consumed his vitality. Over the years, he had become a subordinate of the Enchantress. Although he had kept a low profile, he had never been a kind person. In the past, his infamy was known throughout planet Tianhuang and the Divine Land, and he had slaughtered countless living beings. His gifted divine powers were extremely vicious. Those who were injured by his demon arrows would either die or be severely injured. Even if they did not lose their lives, their injuries would be difficult to recover. Because of this, sometimes some opponents who were stronger than him were not willing to fight him to the death, in case they were injured by his demon arrows. Although he had not been famous in recent years, the Great Sage Zhu Jian was also used to being arrogant. Even under the command of the Enchantress, the Heavenly Wolf Great Sage sometimes had to give way to him. However, not long ago, he had been beaten by Lin Feng and his disciple to the point of abandoning his armor and running away. How could the Great Sage Zhu Jian not hate him? At this moment, the Great Sage Zhu Jian looked at Lin Feng. The only eye on his human face flashed with light, and he kept grinding his teeth. Master of the Celestial Gate, I didn't expect you to have such a day. If it was not for the fact that the cosmic turbulence shattered the void and could not tolerate other powers, the Great Sage Zhu Jian would have drawn his bow and arrow and attacked Lin Feng and his disciple together with the cosmic turbulence. Great Sage Pifao and Great Sage Qiongqi looked at Xianmen Tianzong and the others while resisting the power of the cosmic turbulence. Good. Very good. I didn't kill you last time in the North Wind Sea. Let's see how you're going to resist this time in the ancient Star Ocean. Great Sage Qiongqi felt that today was the best he had felt in all these years. If he had to say something regretful, it would be that the cosmic turbulence was triggered by the omnipotent sage and not him. Not being able to kill Lin Feng and the others with his own hands still made Great Sage Qiongqi feel that it was not satisfying enough. It's just a clone of the Celestial Gate's master. The destruction of the clone does not affect his main body. The Great Sage Pifao glanced at the Great Sage Qiongqi and said lightly, however, it did extinguish his arrogance. He has been too arrogant all these years. He was arrogant, comparable to the Dragon Clan. He was also upset that he was defeated by Lin Feng and his disciple. The Great Sage Qiongqi opened his mouth and laughed sinisterly. Even if the clone is destroyed, it is an unprecedented setback for the Celestial Gate's master. Moreover, his main body is not here in the Star Ocean, but many of his disciples are here. This person has always been protective of his disciples. He loves them very much. Now that they are all buried here, I'm afraid he will be heartbroken. It will be more painful than losing 2 clones. This is what makes me the happiest. Ha! The Great Sage Zhu Jian and the Great Sage Pifao nodded when they heard this. Yes, his disciples, especially the 8 personal disciples, are indeed the Celestial Gate's master's flesh and blood. Not to mention the death of a few, even if one of them is injured, the Celestial Gate's master will not be indifferent. The Great Sage Qiongqi's eyes were fixed on Lin Feng and Shi Tianhao and Wang Lin beside him. He gritted his teeth and said, he used that magic formation and that magic treasure to form the momentum of heaven and earth. It is very powerful and can withstand the cosmic turbulence, but I don't believe he can last forever. It is best that he has the power to defend. In this way, even if he dies, he will not be completely destroyed by the cosmic turbulence. When the cosmic turbulence subsides, if we can find his body and devour it, it will definitely be a great supplement. The porcupine-like hair all over great sage Cheongchi's body stood on end. His eyes were full of ferocity and greed. Under the gaze of the crowd, the momentum of heaven and earth formed by the yin and yang life and death formation and ding of Shenzhou began to shake under the continuous impact of the violent starlight torrents, as if it could collapse at any time. Under the protection of the Haotian mirror, the people of the Taishu temple were closer to the center of the cosmic turbulence than great sage Cheongchi and the other members of the demon clan, but they could still withstand it. Looking at Xianmen Tianzong and the others in the depths of the cosmic turbulence, Shoichi Dashin, Xianlin Taoist, and Kai Fengzhou were gradually unable to withstand the impact of the starlight. Shoichi Dashin, Xianlin Taoist, and Kai Fengzhou also focused their attention. Kai Fengzhou said in a low voice, "According to the information from the Great Zhou dynasty, he has a strange stone that can temporarily break the space channel. I wonder if his doppelganger has brought it into the cosmic turbulence?" Xianlin Taoist's voice rang in his ears. "It is uncertain whether it can be used in the environment of the cosmic turbulence. If it can be used, he does have some hope of escaping. However, since the rise of the master of the celestial sect, he has not suffered too many setbacks. This time he was forced to flee, which made him lose face. Moreover, whether he can take away Ding of Shenzhou and the gate of the cosmic world is still uncertain." Seeing that the defense formed by the yin and yang life and death formation and Ding of Shenzhou was becoming more and more shaky, the great sage, who was covered by the blue light, laughed fiercely. "Your disciple killed the grandson of Six Corners of Yingguang. I didn't make a fuss about it. Do you think the primordial demonic ape clan is easy to bully? You even killed Six Corners of Yingguang. If I can't seek justice for the Six Corners of Divine Monkey Clan, how can I continue to be the clan leader of the primordial demonic ape clan?" Lin Feng had not paid attention to the great sage and the others. Instead, he was focused on sending out magical power after magical power to touch and figure out the cosmic turbulence. After hearing the omnipotent sage's words, he turned his head and suddenly smiled. "After today, you'll be even more ashamed to be the head of your clan. Why don't you think about who's more suitable to be your successor?" Chapter 1025. The primordial demonic ape clan was made up of many branches, including the heaven-reaching demonic ape, Zhuyan demonic ape, divine monkey, six-horned divine monkey, ghost monkey of nine nether, and so on. Not all of them were on good terms. For example, the Zhuyan demonic ape and the ghost monkey of nine nether did not get along well. In the past, Lin Feng, Shi Tianhao, and the others went to Infinite Wasteland and met Zhu Yan. Although they knew that Shi Tianhao had killed the grandson of the six-horned great sage, Zhu Yan did not feel too much hostility toward him. But the great sage had to care, because he was the leader of the entire primordial demonic ape clan and was regarded as the common leader by all the apes. Moreover, the six-horned great sage had always been his confidant, and he had to uphold justice for the six-horned great sage. Previously, when Lin Feng went to Infinite Wasteland, the great sage did not make a move, which had already caused some criticism in the primordial demonic ape clan. But the great sage's prestige was extremely high, and the dissatisfaction of his subordinates soon dissipated. Moreover, the strength that Lin Feng had shown in the battle against Golden Cicada and the Kunlong King also made the demon apes unable to say much. The great sage did not gain nothing from tracking down Golden Cicada, and many experts of the ape clan benefited. But in the desolate ancient Star Ocean, Lin Feng killed the six-horned great sage in front of him, which made the great sage lose a lot of face. The six-horned great sage was not only the leader of the six-horned divine monkey clan, but also the great sage's confidant. He was also a great demon at the astral soul integration realm. How could the great sage not be angry that such an expert of the ape clan had died in the hands of Lin Feng? The great sage had been able to suppress his anger when he schemed against the dragon race earlier. However, Lin Feng and Shoichi Dashin had shifted their target to him at the same time. The great sage was instantly infuriated and triggered an astral turbulence. Astral turbulence was in full swing, and he and Lin Feng were close to the center of it. Even with the Extreme King's relic, there was no guarantee that they would be safe. The great sage was determined to put Lin Feng at risk. After all, the great sage had never entered the star graveyard before. He had never faced the galactic turbulence, and he had never tested if the Extreme Emperor's relic could protect him. What made the great sage feel fortunate was that although he was treading on thin ice, the Extreme King's relic's protection allowed him to successfully survive in the turbulence of the stars. He could also use his starry sea gate. However, the great sage didn't dare to do anything at the moment. He couldn't attack, so he could only watch the astral turbulence hit Xianmen Tianzong and the others. However, the astral turbulence didn't disappoint him. Under the impact of the thousands of starlights, the joint defense formed by Lin Feng's Yin and Yang life and death formation and Ding of Shenzhou became more and more unstable and was on the verge of collapse. Once this layer of defense was broken, Lin Feng might be able to hold on for a while, but Shi Tianhao, Wang Lin, and the others couldn't resist the powerful power of heaven and earth. Kai Fengzhou looked at Shoichi Daishin. Martial Uncle Jingyi, should we help him? Xianlin Taoist said indifferently, the astral turbulence is still at its peak. If we help him, it may slow down the recovery of the Haotian mirror. We can help him, but he must hand over Ding of Shenzhou and the Starry Sea Gate. Shoichi Daishin didn't say anything, but under the cover of the hazy mirror light, he took a step toward the center of the star tomb. After taking a step, Shoichi Daishin stopped, but his action was noticed by Lin Feng and the great sage. The great sage's scarlet eyes flashed fiercely. Although he didn't say anything, Lin Feng naturally understood what Shoichi Daishin meant. Silently looking at Shoichi Daishin, he withdrew his gaze and didn't respond. Seeing him like this, Shoichi Daishin's expression was as calm as usual. His eyes became deeper and deeper, and he didn't take the next step. He began to recuperate and store up his energy, quietly waiting for the astral turbulence to subside. Then he would concentrate his strength and compete with the great sage for the ownerless Starry Sea Gate. Seeing this, the great sage already understood the mystery in a flash. He immediately felt incomparably happy. Master of the celestial sect of wonders, even now, you're still stubborn and arrogant. No one can save you anymore. You killed the 6 corners of Cloud Light, so I'll destroy your 2 clones. You've always protected your arrogant disciples. Today I'll kill all of them here. Although the power of heaven and earth formed by the Yin and Yang life and death formation and Ding of Shenzhou was getting more and more intense under the starlight, Lin Feng's expression was still calm. He still had the time to send out magical power after magical power, trying to integrate into the violent astral turbulence outside. Lin Feng kept trying to figure out the changes. Although the astral turbulence was extremely violent and chaotic, Lin Feng still grasped some of the subtle changes. Hearing the great sage's provocative words, Lin Feng turned his head to look at him and couldn't help laughing. It's not that no one can save me, it's that I don't need others to save me. I'm sorry, Tongun. After today, you'll find that you have even less face to sit in the position of the master of the ape clan. Do you want to think about who is more suitable to be your successor? I think the great sage Zhu Yan is a good choice. He hasn't made any movements all these years. He should be continuing to go through tribulations and break through to the Dharma-ending realm, right? With the flesh and blood of Golden Cicada, it should be much easier than before. Lin Feng chuckled. If the great sage Zhu Yan reaches the Dharma-ending realm, he will also be qualified to take over your position. What do you think? The great sage stared at Lin Feng with his blood-red eyes. He forced himself to stay rational. The treasure left behind by the Extreme Emperor could barely protect him. If he acted rashly and the protective blue light was broken, he would immediately be attacked by the astral turbulence. As Lin Feng said, the great sage Zhu Yan was indeed breaking through to the Dharma-ending realm. 5 years ago in the boundless world, Lin Feng broke the band-tightening spell on the monkey's head. The monkey chased after Golden Cicada and seriously injured him. The great sage and the golden rock great sage also chased after him and took advantage of golden cicada. The flesh and blood of golden cicada helped the great demon to go through the tribulations. Later, the great sage also gave some to the great sage Xu Yan. Although it might endanger his position, if the great sage Xu Yan reached the Dharma-ending realm, it would be a boost to the power of the entire primordial demonic ape clan. Therefore, the great sage did not hide anything. Moreover, the great sage had a lot of power in his hands. Even if the great sage Xu Yan reached the Dharma-ending realm, he was confident that he could suppress him. But now, being ridiculed by Lin Feng, the great sage who was already angry, found it irritating no matter how he listened. Lin Feng said lightly, "Think about it carefully here. If you can return to the infinite wilderness later, you can directly hand over the inheritance. It will save you a lot of time and energy." The great sage grinned. "Master of the celestial sect of wonders, are you still boasting shamelessly at this time? I can return to the infinite wilderness at any time." As he spoke, he patted the star sea gate beside him. "However, it's hard to say whether you can return to the divine land. Perhaps you don't feel sorry for your two doppelgangers? Those disciples who came with you will die here with you. Don't you feel sorry for them?" The great sage's face was full of mockery. "Are you deliberately provoking me so that I lose my cool and break away from the treasure light to attack you? Then, you want me to die with you in the star sea storm?" I was very angry at first, but seeing that the master of the celestial sect of wonders, who has been fearless all these years, has fallen to the point where you have to show off your words, I suddenly don't feel angry anymore. The great sage snorted coldly and grinned. "I can relax now and watch you be destroyed by the star sea storm. Then I can easily take your star sea gate." Lin Feng looked at the great sage. His gaze also swept across the gloating great sage Qiongqi, great sage Zhu Jian, and great sage Pifao, as well as the indifferent Shoichi Dashin and the others. Slowly he shook his head. His gaze finally landed on the great sage again. He said indifferently, "Ignorance is not wrong, but pretending to know when you don't understand is a very laughable thing. The best choice for ignorant people is to shut their mouths and keep quiet. Otherwise, you'll be the one making a fool of yourself." As Lin Feng spoke, he flipped his palm. Suddenly, a jade stone appeared in his hand. It was crystal clear and looked ordinary on the outside. It was the size of a goose egg. Silently, it landed in Lin Feng's palm. Seeing this jade stone, Shoichi Dashin, Shenlin Taoist, and Kai Fengzhou were all slightly moved. "Is this the spirit stone that Liang Pan and Zhu Hongwu once saw? It can break through the space between realms?" In the environment of the star sea storm, this treasure can still break through the space between realms? Kai Fengzhou muttered to himself. "In the dangerous situation of the star sea storm, and not with my true body here, I can be proud to be able to escape unscathed." Shenlin Taoist looked at Shoichi Dashin. "Uncle Master, we have to find a way to keep the Star Sea Gate and Ding of Shenzhou." Lin Feng looked at the people of Taishu Temple and said indifferently, "Look at your expressions. You recognize this item? It seems that Liang Pan and Zhu Hongwu have told you a lot of things. The Star Sea storm affects space too much. Even this treasure is not completely confident that it can create a stable passage out of the desolate ancient Star Sea in the current environment. But, who said that I'm leaving now?" Lin Feng chuckled. "Thanks to the Star Sea storm, from now on, everything has just begun." He suddenly patted the Ding of Shenzhou on top of his head. The huge cauldron's purple aura boiled, and suddenly a large amount of dazzling starlight gushed out. Lin Feng let out a low roar. The world-breaking stone in his hand emitted a formless and invisible wave of mana. It combined with the starlight that gushed out of the divine god cauldron and then poured into the Star Sea Gate beside him. The Star Sea Gate still did not open, but it suddenly shook. Lin Feng opened his palm, and another item appeared in his palm. It was a fragment of the disc. Seeing this fragment, the great sage's expression immediately became extremely ugly. This fragment originated from a disc in Golden Cicada's hand. It had been broken, and the fragments scattered everywhere. One of them fell into Lin Feng's hand. And that disc was also a treasure left behind by Jihuang Xinyuan. Golden Cicada had even used this treasure to shake up the spiritual abyss mountain. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.